Chapter 484. The hero saves a beauty, 2. After obtaining Qumran's blood, although just about 10 drops of blood for each dog, it was their great luck that could totally change their life forms. Compared to the blessing of the White Lotus secret treasure, Qumran's blood was more effective to these stray dogs. Moreover, they were also in the sacrificial altar of the evil god. Quickly, several stray dogs' bodies expanded like balloons and were forced to change their forms bit by bit. No, not dog-headed men. Child San Quan said and stopped this trend of evolution. Black demon dogs were the main force of the demons, but dog-head men were just pure cannon fodders in the war. To any black demon dogs, it was as easy as breathing to transform a common dog into a dog-headed man. However, that wasn't what Child San Quan wanted. If I don't transform them into dog-head men, what can they be used for? Qumran frowned. They were just common stray dogs, how could they be transformed into true black demon dogs? I have a plan. Child San Quan smiled confidently. May, don't eat too much pig trotters. Hua Yu took out her handkerchief and wiped May's mouth. Just now, May had eaten 10 pig trotters, and it seemed that she could still eat 10 more pig trotters. It's not ladylike. However, having a robust appetite wasn't a bad thing for swordsmen. It was a sign that the swordsman's power was growing rapidly. The performance of reaching the peak of the mortal rank was the robust appetite. The capacity for eating of many third-ranked martial artists was 10 times more than common people. Hua Yu thought that May had approached the limit of the mortal rank and started to build up energy for challenging the hero rank now. In fact, Hua Yu was also at this stage, but her family had rich experience to help her solve this problem. High-level herbs and pills and valuable medicine were all good kinds of stuff to solve the hungry feeling at this stage. As an absolute minimum, she could go to the logistical section of the Sword Palace to receive military compressed biscuit. It was a kind of general army provisions, the taste was bad but was free to any disciples of the Sword Palace. Only at this stage, they would have the worry of having little food to eat. After entering the hero rank, the body would naturally understand how to absorb the free energy in the world. In the Western God's domain, people called it mana, and it was called ether or the power of elements in some gods' domains. Hero-ranked beings could survive in the desert, the polar, or the underground world. The hero-ranked beings of some races could even survive in the void. Thinking so, perhaps she could only enjoy May's cute look of eating pig trotters at this time. After May entered the hero rank, she would never be so gluttonous. Well, eat more, May. After thinking it through, Hua Yu's eyes became more gentle. The date today is worthwhile. Unfortunately, happy times are always too short. While Hua Yu was immersed in her happy time with May, several fierce men rushed them from an alley. They were all wearing black leather clothing on their bodies, steel wristers on their arms, steel spike knee pads on their knees, and black iron belts on their waists. They were all about 2 meters tall with a ferocious look. Both sides of their heads were shaven, leaving a strip of noticeably longer golden hair in the center of their heads. Wah ha 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 ha. Ha ha ha. Food. Water. And woman. Food. Give me your food. Don't resist, or I will break your neck. They licked their rough axes or sharp knives in their hands, looking perfectly the definition of villains. In public on the street, they surrounded Hua Yu and May. Hua Yu looked at them in surprise. Their appearances were so weird as if they were coming from some borderland. Where did these strange men come from? Food. Food. Give me your food. Or we will do something to you. These third-ranked big fellows gazed at the pig trotter in May's hands with a greedy look, as if they would immediately start a fight if May refused them. Are you really so hungry? Hua Yu couldn't understand it. She could see that they were at the third rank, How could they live in misery in the sword tip area of the White Lotus sword domain? The third rank was the limit of mortals. If they came to other places, they could be a master of a city or a general of an army. In the valley, Qumran touched his head. It seems that something is wrong. Don't worry, it's just hard to change their nature. They have done everything we told them to do. Child San Quan said and frowned, looking at the several big fellows who were drooling at May's pig trotter. In his plan, he wanted to make the whole thing more dramatic, so he let the stray dogs transform into the big fellows now. However, they were outwardly strong but inwardly brittle. They had the life fatalities of the third rank, but their wisdom was so low that they could only remember several spoken lines. Now, they had said the words Child San Quan taught them. It was the show time of the hero. Go ahead, Qumran. They have accomplished their mission. Child San Quan lightly waved the fan in his hand with a smile. They have accomplished their mission, therefore, they are useless now. It's time to abandon them. This was the fate of these stray dogs. Okay. Qumran threw his black cape into the air and leaped up. Then, he landed in front of the drooling big fellows with a tiger smile. His appearance, clothes, and expressions were all tailor-made by Child San Quan. The only purpose was to make Qumran be the coolest at this moment. You are dead now. Qumran slowly raised his head with an icy stare. The strong, powerful body contained amazing explosive force in every muscle. Looking at his ornate obsidian armor, the old, mysterious runes on it showed that it wasn't a common armor that could be obtained by mortals. Plus his deep, black pupils and handsome face, he looked like the instantiation of cool. Yes, this was the appearance Child San Quan made for the prince. There was a world of difference between his appearance and the appearances of the human forms of the several stray dogs. At first glance, he looked like a protagonist coming out of a hero novel. Qumran perfectly landed on the ground, then drawing out a black lancer from his back using the coolest posture taught by Child San Quan. The black lancer was made up of 3 components of top-level spirit weapons. A pattern of a black dragon could be vaguely seen from the body of the lancer, which looked pretty powerful. At the same time, Child San Quan's plan flashed through his mind. Qumran, remember, the world of love is more competitive than the battlefield. If you want to obtain your golden princess, you must obtain May first by all means. Before you start, you need to know what role you will play in this plan. Play a role. Don't I only need to rush to her, push her down and get laid? Qumran said disapprovingly. In his mind, this was all the method to pursuing a female. No. Totally wrong. You read too few novels. Child San Quan shook his head and looked at Qumran's confused face with pity in his eyes. You have read a few novels, but novels can only be a reference. Your range of reading is too narrow. Yes, fall in love at first sight only happened in novels. They could be used for reference, but one could never simply copy the content in the novels. There were more professional books for this. The methods that can even let a monkey fall in love, the secret that can even let an otaku find a girlfriend, surprise. The ideal men in the eyes of women are actually, these books were the holy Bibles of love. Common love novels were just some introduction to love. According to the analysis of my logical inference, we can use one word to describe the perfect dream lover of females, said Child San Quan confidently. Prince. Prince. Qumran pointed at himself. Am I not a prince? I have the bloodline of Cerberus. No, I don't mean the prince of bloodline, but the prince of the collection of ideals. The more characteristics of you meet the collection, the more women would be attracted by you. The first, you must be tall. Child San Quan looked at Qumran's 3 meters tall body and shook his head. What? Ain't I tall? Qumran protested. No, not 3 meters. The ideal height in women's minds should be when she hugs you from the front, you can kiss on her forehead after slightly lowering your head, and when she hugs you from your back, her face can be supported on your shoulder. Based on May's height, the height between 180 centimeters to 190 centimeters is perfect. 3 meters tall, are you going to scare others to death? Ha! Qumran was speechless. He was the prince of the black demon dog race. How would he think a bit about the ideal height in human women's minds? So, you need to transform into a human first, and your height should be 185 centimeters. Child San Quan sketched the outline on the paper. The second, you must be rich. Women have a high requirement to their lover. Only the person who meets women's dream for their future can easily go into their hearts. Therefore, it's a must-be option to be rich. Qumran looked at himself in embarrassment. He was so poor that he didn't even have pants. Don't worry, I can help you solve this problem. Just don't forget that you owe me. Child San Quan said and ground his teeth for the money he had spent. He had bought a set of obsidian armor and a standard god weapon, Black Dragon Lancer, for Qumran, which were 10 times more expensive than their weight in gold. Fortunately, there was a trading center of the Sky Tower here, otherwise, he couldn't even buy these using money. The third, you must be handsome. Women like handsome guys, from the mortal rank to the legend rank, no woman doesn't pursue high-quality genes from men. Therefore, you must be handsome if you want to pursue her. Tall, rich, and handsome are the 3 basic elements to be a prince. Under Child San Quan's pen, the picture of a tall, handsome prince who was wearing a set of black armor and holding a black lancer appeared on the paper. Is that all? Qumran looked at the unfamiliar appearance on the paper and asked in an indecisive tone. Of course, they are not enough. Tall, rich, and handsome are just the 3 basic elements. Remember, women are emotional creatures. They hope that their prince is extremely wealthy and has friends all over the world, but will also stay with them all day and have a high degree of enthusiasm toward their family. No matter what happens, the prince can always go home on time. They hope that the prince is drop-dead gorgeous and is also unswervingly loyal. No matter what happens, the prince will never take a glance at other women. They hope that the prince is the greatest hero in the world, and can give them the most gorgeous wedding. But after that, the prince will be willing to give up everything and live peacefully, unobtrusively with them. They hope that they don't need to do anything, and the prince will find them by accident, then pursue them with the most fierce enthusiasm, marrying them after defeating all the opponents who also want to marry them. In short, they want a man who has all advantages a human can have in the world and doesn't have any flaws. They want a man who is rich and gentle, loves everything about them and can forgive all their shortcomings. This is the so-called prince. No. I can't do it. I surrender. Qumran raised both his hands. How could such a prince really exist anywhere? Of course, this kind of prince doesn't exist anywhere. The ideal prince only exists in their minds, it's just a fantasy. Therefore, if you can make yourself look like such a prince, you can pursue any girl easily. Trust me on this, it can't be wrong. After using his ability, logical inference, Child San Quan immediately started to change Qumran's body. The first is your dog head. It must be changed. How? Qumran protested. It was the most charming part of his body. Without the dog head, how could he be called bloodthirsty hunter and darkness beast? Ignore him. Ignore him. Next is your claws. They must be changed. No. At least, don't change my steel claws. Qumran protested again. Without his claws that were as hard as diamond, how could he fight against his enemies? No. Remember, you are a prince. How will any prince in the world fight using claws? Child San Quan ignored Kumran's sad cry and cut off his proud claws. The final step is to tidy up your appearance. This was the main point. Child San Quan held a boning knife and cut off all the unnecessary flesh and blood of Kumran's body, then used the god power of the evil god Tlahua's Kalpandakutli, transforming Kumran into a human, whose height was just 185 centimeters but not 3 meters tall. Not only that. The appearance of this body was perfect. His eyebrows were like a pair of sharp swords, and his eyes were as bright as stars. His nose was up and his hair was straight, plus his strong muscles. He was like coming out of the dream of countless girls. The height is 185 centimeters, the wingspan is 2 meters, and the body weight is 85 kilograms. Well, not bad. Everything is perfect. After checking Kumran's naked body again, Child San Quan nodded with satisfaction, then knocked on Kumran's indescribable body part. 28 centimeters. Are you satisfied? No. I'm the real prince of the black demon dog race. Why do I have to pretend to be a fake human prince? Now, Kumran looked totally like a human. He roared and clenched his fists, spreading a strong temperament in the air. I just changed your appearance. Your power isn't reduced. Don't worry, the organization will arrange an identity of a real prince for you. From now on, you are Prince Kumran. Let the plan start. You are bringing about your own destruction. Kumran held the black dragon lancer in his hand and dashed to his subordinates, who were still drooling. Goo! The smell of the pig trotter was really tempting. Ha ha ha. Ha ha ha. We will kill you. Although they were stupid, they still shouted out the lines aloud. Of course, it was because of Child San Quan. Their simple brains couldn't remember but so many words, so Child San Quan imprinted these words into their minds. Oh, beautiful ladies, don't worry, I'm here. Of course, this was also designed by Child San Quan. Kumran perfectly did what Child San Quan told him, including the time and the posture of his appearing. None of them were wrong. You, who are you? Hua Yu gazed this black armored man vigilantly, because she naturally felt that something wasn't right. This was the sword tip area, not everyone was allowed to come here. Moreover, the 3 villains were all at the 3rd rank. It was hard to believe that 3 third-ranked people would rob food and water on the street. Isn't there a shop beside them? Even if their minds had problems, it wasn't likely that they would be reduced to poverty. The 3rd rank wasn't common. Hua Yu herself had just reached this rank not long ago. A lot of forces would be willing to recruit them, even if there was really a problem with their brains. Roar! Don't resist. Give me your food and water. Or I will kill you. The 3 big fellows rushed to Hua Yu and Mei together. Total annihilation. Used the unfamiliar weapon and made the strange pose. Kumran brandished his lancer, sweeping the 3 robbers into the garbage of history. After drawing back his lancer, Kumran looked at the 2 people behind him with a proud look. How was it? Wasn't I cool? He had the confidence to be a perfect prince, no matter whether he was the black demon dog prince or the human prince. Thank you. Hua Yu said politely, showing her demeanor as the leader of the Starwing Knights. Although she felt strange, Kumran indeed helped them. Awu. Mei was still biting the pig trotter and looking at this tall man with curiosity. It was the right time. Launch your attack. Staring at the maid with your deep, affectionate eyes. Kumran instinctively started to use Soulful Stare after hearing Child San Quan's order. Is it really useful? Although Kumran did everything Child San Quan told him to do, however, he didn't think that he would like a human. He was the prince of the black demon dog race. How would he fall in love with a human, who only walked with 2 legs. Only the Golden Princess could make his heartbeat rock. Humans were just prey in his eyes. However, when he carefully looked at May, he suddenly felt a palpitation. Why does this human look so cute today? It was an impulse from the deep side of his bloodline. It was the boiling sound of the bloodline of Cerberus. So beautiful, a special feeling suddenly started to germinate in Qumran's heart. May, Starfire, looked at the man in front of her. She was confused for a moment, then smiled. TGA. Looking at May's smile, Starfire actually, Qumran's hand shook so hard that he could barely hold the black dragon lance. He felt as if he just saw the sun of the summer. What is this feeling? She was just a human, moreover, she killed him not long ago. She was his natural enemy, but why was her smile so sweet? No, not only her smile, but also her smell had also become different. Next is to show your wealth, power and demeanor, said Child San Quan. He hadn't noticed the great change in Qumran's heart. The most important thing is to be passionate. Trust me, most women have zero resistance to an excellent man who is passionately pursuing them. Therefore, you must be a prince. Prince Qumran. Paw. Qumran brandished his lance. He didn't need Child San Quan to tell him anything and directly burst with enthusiasm. I'm Qumran, the Prince of Goodlund Kingdom. All right. Qumran also didn't know where the Goodlund Kingdom was, since Child San Quan gave him this identity and promised that it would be flawless. From now on, he was the real prince of the Goodlund Kingdom. For this, Child San Quan even made a special card for him to show his identity and combat ability data. Name, Qumran, the Prince of the Goodlund Kingdom. True name, Qumran, the Prince of the Black Demon Dog Race. Gender, male. Height, 185 centimeters. Weight, 80 kilograms. Career, hero. Ranked Lancer. Property, chaos, evil. Strength, A. As the Black Demon Dog Prince, your strength is far stronger than other hero-ranked beings. Mana, D. You don't have any magic talent. Endurance, A+. You can fight for 3 days and 3 nights before you feel tired. Luck, E. Very bad in every sense. Agility, B. You are as fast as wind. God Weapon, Standard God Weapon. Black Dragon Lance, Black Obsidian Armor. Class Skills, Magic Resistance, B. Your strong body can let you resist most magic, not including high-level and forbidden magic. Divinity, C. You have a part of the bloodline of Cerberus. When it's necessary, you can transform into a black demon dog again. It's not recommended to expose your true body in the human world. Evil God's Shelter. You are watched by the evil god Tlahuaskalpandakutli. If you die, your core will be recycled by the power of the evil god. Personal skills, Dark Sky Fall, B. You can create a dark area that can swallow all lights. The life force of the living beings in the Dark Sky Fall will be absorbed by you and transform into your power. Shape-shifting. You can active your bloodline of Cerberus and transform into a strong bloodthirsty hunter, swallowing all lives without mercy. Naturally, obtain all abilities of all third-ranked black demon dogs. Berserk, B. You have the potential to be a berserker. At the price of losing your mind, your strength will be greatly improved. Standard God Weapon, Black Dragon Lance, a heavy lance that was made of fine gold and fine silver. It is 2 meters long with black obsidian gems engraved on it, and is able to tear open most magic shields. Because it's too heavy, most hero-ranked beings can't use it. Black Obsidian Armor, a valuable armor that was made of the black obsidian which can block magic. It can be used by a strong knight or warrior. Because it's made of black obsidian, the wearer can't use any magic. Apart from luck, Qumran's data is absolutely excellent. His power is far stronger than most hero-ranked beings. After recording Qumran's data, Child San Quan had a completely new appraisal of Qumran. No wonder that the great evil god, Tlahuascalpantacutli, was willing to save him. The bloodline of Cerberus is indeed powerful. Even if he didn't hold a weapon, the power of his body was far stronger than most hero-ranked humans. This was the reason why the black demon dog race could be the principal force of the demons. Even the elf race suffered a great loss when facing them in the war. If it wasn't because most black demon dogs' minds weren't clear, including their king, Cerberus also did a stupid thing that aided an evil god in the same camp. Originally, the black demon dog race was entitled to obtain a higher position in the demon army. After being tidied up by Child San Quan, Qumran's appearance could undoubtedly win a full score in front of Huayu and Mei. Prince. Huayu looked up and down at Qumran. Indeed, his black obsidian armor and black dragon lance were priceless treasures. Not all hero-ranked beings could obtain a god weapon. In the endless gods' domains, god weapon was born from a coagulum of the power of fantasy or from the bloodline that contained the power of god. When a god weapon's master died, not all people could inherit the god weapon. Its new master must obtain its recognition first. If a person couldn't obtain the recognition of the god weapon, even if the person holding the god weapon in his hand, the god weapon wouldn't be better than a common weapon. Apart from a few successors who had been recognized by the god weapon's previous master, or the children of the god weapon's previous master, it was difficult to obtain the recognition of a real god weapon. According to the statistics of the Endless Gods domain, over 99% hero-ranked beings didn't have a suitable god weapon. 70% of them could only use a standard god weapon, and have to try their best to make their standard god weapon become a real god weapon. Most people started preparing for this even when they were still at the mortal rank. 15% of them luckily obtained the heritage of god weapon. They could use a part of the power of the god weapons, but they still needed to build the relationship with their god weapon, hoping that they could be recognized by their god weapon someday. The remaining few were really the hero-ranked people who had their own god weapons. There was always discrimination amongst different people, including hero-ranked people. A god weapon won't choose a weakling to be its master. To be the master of a god weapon, there were a lot of preconditions. The first, the people who could be a god weapon's master must be a super genius even amongst all hero-ranked people. Some of them had great bloodlines, inheriting the god weapons of their ancestors. Most of the time, only one person in a big family was entitled to inherit the god weapon of the family. For example, the strongest sword of the Great Xia sword domain, Great Xia Dragon Finch, was the god weapon that stood for the fate of the entire Great Xia sword domain. Only the strongest swordsman could pick it up. Some people carried the hope of countless people and even became the incarnation of God on earth, so that they could lift the source of the holy light, Holy Grail. Some of them were the master of a god's domain or a saint dervish. The stronger the god weapon was, the stronger the mind of its master should be. There was a worldwide gap between a hero-ranked person who had a god weapon and another hero-ranked person who didn't have a god weapon. For example, if a fourth-ranked person obtained the recognition of a god weapon, he could even challenge a sixth-ranked person who didn't have a god weapon. Moreover, only the hero-ranked people who had a god weapon had the potential to enter a higher realm. It was also a necessary step to let a god weapon become a legend-ranked weapon. Just like the Sands of Time, the sword of the Sixth Sky Sword Cassina, before Cassina was known as the Sixth Sky Sword, very few people knew of its existence. Until Cassina became a famous legend-ranked being, then it also became a legend-ranked weapon and its power was incredibly strengthened. A god weapon was the key to reaching the legend rank. Unless it was a legendary fantastic creature, none of the hero-ranked people could reach the legend rank without a god weapon. Each legendary god weapon corresponded to a legend-ranked being. Behind every legend-ranked weapon, there was a long story or myth. Huayu had only seen one god weapon, Cassina's Sands of Time. Casina and the Sands of Time were like the two sides of the same coin called legend. Qumran's black dragon lance gave Hua Yu a feeling of unstoppableness, just like Qumran himself. It meant that Qumran's talent was incredibly strong, otherwise, he and his standard god weapon couldn't show this sharp temperament. Humph, they are just several hooligans. Don't mind them. Qumran thought that his gallant performance was effective, he laughed. Although this was the first time he used a lance, however, he thought that the black dragon lance was pretty good, at least, it was far better than other weapons. Maybe he was born to be a lancer. He even wanted to howl to express his joy. At this moment, Qumran was in high and vigorous spirits. Are you the disciples of the Sword Palace? I'm also a disciple of the Sword Palace. I just arrived at the Sword Palace today. It was a lie, but also the truth. In the endless gods' domains, there was indeed a small kingdom called Goodland, but there was never a prince called Qumran. However, from the moment Prince Qumran appeared in front of Hua Yu and Mei, it had become truth. From now on, this prince from a mysterious kingdom of the Western gods' domain would become a real disciple of the Sword Palace. He even had the third heirship to the throne of the Goodland Kingdom. Oh, you are our classmate. Hua Yu slightly relaxed her vigilance. Since he was also the disciple of the Sword Palace, this weird meeting had a believable explanation. Perhaps, this prince and his subordinates played this trick called, the hero saves the beauty. As for his goal. Hua Yu looked at Mei, who was tightly holding her wrist in her hands. Tut, she found it. Not surprising, after all, she is from that family. Child San Quan looked at them in the dark and smiled. It doesn't matter, he didn't expect that Qumran would reveal himself. The most important thing was the first impression. Their first meeting couldn't be normal. The more striking it was, the deeper that maid would remember Qumran. Even by fair means or foul, he must make her remember him. At this point, Qumran did really good. It was all worth the black obsidian armor and the black dragon lance. Anyway, Qumran wasn't going to pursue Hua Yu but that maid beside her. After leaving the first impression, it was time to start the second stage. The core of the book, the methods that can even let a monkey fall in love, was to hit on what one likes. As your classmate, it's really a pity that I couldn't be present at the opening ceremony together with you. To make up for it, my treat. With a bright smile on his face, Qumran repeated the words Child San Quan taught him, and staring at Mei with his scorching eyes. Mei's eyes suddenly brightened up. Food. Delicious food. A lot of delicious foods. Well, thank you. Looking at Mei's impatient expression, Hua Yu couldn't help but emit a sigh. Mei, you will be kidnapped someday if you continue to be like this. One dish after another was piled up on the table, one dumpling after another was quickly eaten by Mei. Mei, Starfire's appetite was 10 times better than usual, her appearance looked as if she was going to eat all the foods of the restaurant. Looking at Mei's happy face, Qumran sweated profusely. He quietly calculated the money he had. They weren't sufficient. That idiot. He was deceived. Child San Quan waved and quickly closed his fan. Not surprisingly, that girl, the miss of the Hua family, the leader of the Starwing Knights, had found Qumran's purpose. This time, his wallet really would become empty, oh. Looking at Mei's happy smile when she was eating, Hua Yu felt as if her heart had melted. Mei's spoiled look only belonged to her. It was a treasure that only she could see. Because she could see Mei's cute expression, she decided to forgive the prince's poor performance. How could there be any third-ranked hooligans in any corner of the world? Please, be more professional the next time. Only this kind of silly rural prince would think that his plan of the hero saves the beauty really worked. In Hua Yu's eyes, Mei paid more attention to the pig trotter in her hand than the prince. Oh, I can barely restrain myself. Why is Mei so cute today? In order to restrain her impulse of hugging Mei in her arms, Hua Yu did her best to rein in her desire. Oh, no. I don't have enough money. Looking at the dishes piled up on the table, Kumran felt a faint daze. Apart from the black dragon lance and the black obsidian armor, he was as poor as a church mouse. Does he need to sell them to pay for the food? Sigh, can't you do anything right? That's all for today, we have accomplished the first and the second goals. Kumran, perform the final plan. Looking at Kumran's impatient look, Child Sanquan sighed in his heart. Even though it had transformed from a black demon dog to a human prince, essentially, he was still an idiot. He would expose himself if he stayed here any longer. Hit and run, this was also the secret of pursuing. As a man, he must be patient. The prince still needed to learn a lot of things. Mei, did you get enough? Hua Yu couldn't help but laugh when she saw Kumran running away embarrassedly. What an interesting entertainment. I didn't expect that Mei could be so charming. Look, this prince from a rural area was totally charmed by her. It seemed that Mei poisoning was spreading. Mei, Starfire, even licked the dish clean, she didn't even leave a drop of juice in it. She was very satisfied, in her eyes, it was all due to Hua Yu. As for that prince just now, did he come to invite me to dinner? Okay, our next destination is the seashore. Hua Yu carefully helped Mei wipe her mouth, then she held Mei's hand, walked along the street and arrived at the boundary of the sword tip area. A magic ward was protecting this place, separating the sword tip area and the sword body area. The ward was so powerful that it was visible to the naked eye. It was a partially transparent amber-colored wall, connecting with the ley lines of the entire White Lotus Sword domain. It was literally the final bulwark of the White Lotus Sword domain. The ward here was the same as the shield of the Sword Palace, it was a perfect compounded magic circle, if necessary, it could even be strengthened by the power of the Sky Tower. It was also one of the heritages Yunhai the Sword Master left for the White Lotus Sword domain. It could even block the attacks from legend-ranked enemies. Apart from the White Lotus secret treasure, it was also one of the reasons that attracted talented disciples for the Sword Palace. However, in front of Mei's authority, this final bulwark was meaningless. Mei just stood in front of the wall, it naturally opened a crack for her, straightly leading to the seashore. Mei, your authority, looking at the final bulwark easily opened a crack, Hua Yu was shocked. In fact, she only wanted to go to the embankment, watching the sea from a distance. She didn't expect that Mei could actually walk into the ward without any difficulty. In her memory, only one person, or rather to say, one floating ship had this authority. The Sixth Sky Sword, Cassina the Battle God's floating ship, the Sands of Time. Lost in thought, Hua Yu vaguely understood something. Walking along the seashore, they could smell the fresh sea air, looking at seagulls flying freely in the sky. Compared to the 50 meters tall walls in the sword handle area, the seashore beside the boundary of the sword tip area was peaceful and delightful. Mei, let's run. Hua Yu smiled. She took off her socks and stepped on the white sands, leaving a line of footprints behind her. Mei, Starfire, also took off her socks and stepped onto Hua Yu's footprints playfully. Blue sea, green waves, and white sand beach. Hua Yu and Mei held each other's hands, walking together under the sunset. Without warning, Mei ran to the sea and kicked the water with her feet. Ah! Hua Yu's body got wet and she felt both funny and annoyed. Mei is too wayward today, as if she just became a naughty little devil. Hey! Hua Yu couldn't stand it. Her feet also kicked the sea water and wet Mei's body. Unlike Hua Yu's white dress, Mei was wearing the black maid uniform, even if she got wet, Hua Yu couldn't see anything. Hua Yu was still the one who suffered losses. Through the wet white dress, the outline of her underwear was exposed. Mei, Starfire, and Hua Yu played. They almost forgot the passage of time until the sun almost dipped below the horizon. Mei, am I very cunning? The golden sunlight reflected on Hua Yu's golden hair. Because her hair was wet, the originally golden curled hair had become smooth now, like golden tassels. She carefully held Mei's body in her arms, their figures overlapped under the sunset. I did this to you before others also noticed this. Sure enough, I can't be a perfect knight. I'm sorry, my ancestor of the white golden rose. Hua Yu lightly kissed Mei's soft lips. This time, it wasn't a sneak attack from Mei, but she willingly did it. Pleasant taste, the saline taste of the seawater. Mei, I love you, even if you are really. I love you forever. In the sky, Mei sat on the roof of the girls' dorm with her bare feet, looking up into the star-studded sky. There were several star roads amongst the endless stars, connecting together with the sky tower. They were the marks of the endless gods' domains, the star bridges that connected countless worlds. Because of the star bridges, the vast world of the stars could exist, people in different sword domains could interact with each other. Awu. Mei ate the last pig trotter, contentedly laying down on the roof. Unlike her sister, Star Thunder, who couldn't fall to sleep if she didn't sleep on the bed, Starfire could sleep anywhere, which was a habit that was inherited from her mother. The soft star lights shone on her body, looking warm and peaceful. After playing all day, Starfire was indeed tired. She quickly went off to dreamland. An amber beetle landed on the stone figure in the cortile of the girls' dorm, monitoring the girls' dorm, and saw Mei, Starfire's graceless sleeping posture. After a while, Hua Yu in her white nightclothes appeared. Looking at Mei who slept on the roof without vigilance, she couldn't help but rub her temples. Mei, don't sleep in this place. Mei, wake up, you will catch a cold. Unfortunately, no matter what Hua Yu said, Mei still didn't wake up. She turned over and kept sleeping. Well, Hua Yu was groomed to be an aristocratic miss. She never faced such a tough person like Mei was now. She was completely indifferent to whatever Hua Yu did. Finally, Hua Yu had to pick her up and carry her to her room. Goo! It seemed that the smell of Hua Yu activated the instinct memory of Yunxi's body. His body naturally stretched out two hands and grasped Hua Yu's big, soft, full breasts. Hua Yu's body shivered and she almost fell from the roof. Did you do that on purpose, Mei? Looking at Mei in her arms, whose eyes were still closed with an innocent look on her face, Hua Yu angrily pinched her face. The smooth hand feel made Hua Yu's face turn red. Suddenly, she felt an incredible joy from it. She couldn't help but pinch Mei's face over and over again. Woof! Starfire almost exposed her true identity in her sleep. Her hands grasped tightly on Hua Yu's breasts as if they were having a competition. Undoubtedly, it was an unfair competition. Hua Yu didn't have any advantage from the beginning. When she finally walked into Mei's room, even her feet became limp. Apparently, the damages from a pinching face and rubbing breasts weren't at the same level. To make it worse, as time went by, Mei, Starfire, was becoming more and more skillful. Undoubtedly, it was the godlike talent Yunxi's body had mastered after marrying over 1,000,000 brides in the water god's world. Even though his body just did it instinctively, it wasn't something that Hua Yu could resist. As a result, Hua Yu suddenly found that her nightclothes disappeared. She didn't only become naked but also was laying on Mei's bed, being rubbed by Mei as if she was a naked white lamb. No, I'm a knight. I must follow the creed of the knight. Hua Yu's voice became lower and lower as her face became redder and redder. Humility. Mei skillfully stretched out her tongue and licked the tops of the plump fruits. Integrity. While Yu did her best to resist, however, her struggle was destined to be useless. This was May's room. No matter what she did here, no one would know about it. Compassion. May wasn't being moved. To be precise, the body was moving following its instincts. Starfire was still sleeping. Bravery. While Yu gazed at May with an imploring look. She was following in the footsteps of Mei Lan, Ling Ling, and Lulu. People always repeated the same mistake. Nothing is new under the sun. Sacrifice. While Yu didn't behave better than Mei Lan and Ling Ling in the face of May's attack. Honor. While Yu bit her golden hair and endured. She only hoped that May would stop after a while. Soul. Will May let go of the lamb that has fallen into her hands? The truth was cruel, because May's body was moving following its instinct, and the body didn't have any intellect. Therefore, while Yu suffered all the things Mei Lan and Ling Ling experienced last night, and because she was alone, she would face a double experience. Snow-white sheet, cluttered golden hair, empty pupils, sweat all over her body. From her toes to her ears, Hua Yu's body was stained with May's body odor. After Lulu, Ling Ling, and Mei Lan, another member of the Starwing Knights, the leader of the Starwing Knights, had also fallen and fell into May's hands. May poisoning was still spreading. Chapter 491, The Witch's Prey in the Morning. 1. Clear water came tumbling down from tens of meters above her, and the droplets splashed like pearls with a clear and pleasant sound. A large area of water mist covered the surrounding area in the range of 100 meters, making the pool under the waterfall like a dreamland, showing light and empty atmosphere. Red Lotus was sitting under the waterfall, on an ancient rock which stood out in the air. She silently felt the scouring of the water flowing over her skin, and prayed in the morning. Her red witch clothes had long been wet, vaguely revealing part of the snow-white outline of her skin. Boom! Boom! The water bombarded Red Lotus's body in waves at a high speed and splashed all over the sky. Everything is changeable, everything should return, only the sword will be forever. Truth is true, flames of heavens, burns up the world. In front of Red Lotus, only the divine weapon, Red Lotus Holy Sword, which was inherited from generation to generation by the witches in White Lotus Sword domain, emitted bright red light. All the water flows disappeared when they approached this divine weapon, not even a trace of steam could spill out into the air. The high temperature was horrible enough to burn mountains and boil the sea, but the Red Lotus Holy Sword suspended in front of Red Lotus in silence didn't even transfer the slightest iota of heat. The huge waterfall was meeting an invisible hole. In front of the Red Lotus Holy Sword, all water disappeared completely without any traces. The history of the witches in White Lotus Sword domain could be traced back to the era of Yunhai the Sword Master. Normally, every generation of witches were the guardians of the White Lotus secret treasure. They were responsible for protecting and guarding the White Lotus secret treasure. Without exception, all witches were at the hero rank, and all of them were born in the White Lotus Sword domain. They would never leave this sword domain in their lifetime. The current master of the White Lotus Sword domain had studied in 3 sword domains when he was young, and he even once had the opportunity to enter a higher rank. Just because of his bad luck, he became frustrated and returned to his hometown, holding the position of the master of the White Lotus Sword domain. Relatively speaking, none of the witches ever left White Lotus Sword domain. They inherited the history of witches from generation to generation and guarded the White Lotus Sword domain. It could be said that the witches who guarded the White Lotus secret treasure were actually the real masters of White Lotus Sword domain. Only because the White Lotus Sword domain needed a channel to communicate with the outside world, so it must have a spokesman that stood for the White Lotus Sword domain. White Lotus Sword Master was such a spokesman. He was responsible for all kinds of foreign affairs of the White Lotus Sword domain, and when necessary, he would go to other sword domains on behalf of the White Lotus Sword domain. No matter what happened, witches could never leave the White Lotus Sword domain. Even if the sword domain was going to be destroyed, they would face the end of the sword domain without hesitation. In this sense, the inheritance of witches was the real highest power of the White Lotus sword domain, but not the replacement of the master of the White Lotus sword domain. Red Lotus and White Lotus were the next witches of the White Lotus sword domain. Moreover, they were rare twin witches, even in the history of the White Lotus sword domain. Whether it was Red Lotus or White Lotus, their talent was at the highest level in history. If it wasn't because that in order to complete the inheritance ceremony of the witches, they had to accomplish a special achievement, they would have been qualified to replace the old White Lotus sword master to be the supreme rulers of the White Lotus sword domain. There was no need to doubt their strength. They were excellent hero-ranked twin witches that even Hua Hua was profuse in praise about. Even the current White Lotus sword master, who had attained the 6th rank, hadn't seen the door of the legendary rank, while Red Lotus had long been recognized by her god weapon, Red Lotus Holy Sword, and her sword talent was strong enough to be able to be compared with Hua Hua. Even amongst all beings of all races in the endless gods' domains, Red Lotus and White Lotus were rare geniuses born with godlike talents. A god weapon wouldn't choose a weak person to be its master. Red Lotus was such a person who was qualified to be recognized directly by Red Lotus Holy Sword. She was born with the right to challenge the legend rank. If she was the only witch in this generation, the old White Lotus sword master could have already retired. And this was the problem, she was not alone. One of the rules of the inheritance ceremony of witches was irrevocable. To be the god witch, she must accomplish the inheritance ceremony of a god weapon. Red Lotus Holy Sword was Red Lotus god weapon. The problem was her sister, White Lotus. She should have inherited another god weapon, but an accident happened. She made a piece of equipment called Star and Moon Ring herself. The god weapon White Lotus gave up inheriting was called Green Lotus Throne, which wasn't inferior to Red Lotus Holy Sword at all. It wasn't difficult for White Lotus to obtain the recognition of that god weapon. Theoretically, as long as they were the god weapons of witches, White Lotus could inherit them with ease. However, White Lotus refused to inherit the Green Lotus Throne, nor any other god weapons of witches. As long as she nodded her head, any god weapon would be her possession. Over 99% of hero-ranked beings would do their best to obtain such an opportunity. However, White Lotus just turned a blind eye to it, which shocked the entire Sword Palace. Red Lotus also did not understand why White Lotus was so insistent that she did not inherit any of the god weapons of witches. Until she put on that thing, she finally realized what her sister wanted. No, absolutely not. The prince absolutely does not exist, he was just a person in your dream. White Lotus, you can't make mistakes. No man is good in this world. After being washed by the rushing water of the waterfall, Red Lotus sincerely prayed that her sister would sober up from the unrealistic dream of the prince. Chapter 492, The Witches Pray in the Morning, 2. Compared to Red Lotus, whose heart was so annoyed that she had to calm herself down by washing her body under the waterfall, White Lotus was really into the state of meditation. On her forehead, the star and moon ring with the patterns of sun, moon, and stars radiated a soft, holy light, shining on her soft and white skin, making her look like an immortal, not merely a human being. No, sister. Give it up, give it up, give it up. That prince doesn't exist. It was just a dream. Red Lotus repeated the words over and over again, trying to make her sister, White Lotus, change her mind. The weapon White Lotus chose for herself wasn't any of the god weapons of witches, but the star and moon ring she made for herself. When Red Lotus finally realized that White Lotus had no intention of inheriting any of the god weapons in the Sword Palace, she was really in a panic. She couldn't understand White Lotus' decision. Except for the hero-ranked people who had no way of obtaining a god weapon, then they would try to make a god weapon for themselves. If they had any chance of obtaining a god weapon, no one would spend hundreds of years making a god weapon from scratch. It wasn't simple to upgrade a standard god weapon to be a real god weapon. As the crystallization of the power of fantasy, all god weapons had their own unique attributes. There were no two identical god weapons within the endless gods' domains. From a standard god weapon to a real god weapon, it often took hundreds of years or even thousands of years. The earliest god weapons were granted by fantastic creatures. When human beings were still in the age of ignorance, fantastic creatures were undoubted gods in people's eyes. A god weapon was such a part of the god, which was the crystallization of gods that once only gods and fantastic creatures could use. Human beings had no qualifications to use any god weapons at all. It took millions of years for humans and other races to understand god weapons, the crystallizations of the rules of the universe. The original god weapons, without exception, were all related to gods. They were absolute artifacts. Only very few of these original god weapons still remained in the world. Most of them were destroyed or disappeared long ago into history. Most of today's god weapons were formed by human beings and other races through their own understanding of the weapons used by the original gods. They created their own god weapons step by step, relying on their own power of the rules. It was extremely difficult to make a god weapon, especially to make a god weapon from start to finish. Even the best hero-ranked genius would spend hundreds of years waiting for a standard god weapon to be recognized by the rules of the universe and become a real god weapon. Nowadays, most god weapons were inherited from generation to generation. Rarely would people be willing to make a god weapon for themselves from scratch. However, White Lotus chose this most difficult path. She completely gave up on inheriting any of the god weapons of witches and chose to make the star and moon ring for no reason, and devoted herself to cultivating it. Red Lotus was anxious in her heart. She did not oppose White Lotus's decision of making the star and moon ring. However, she could not accept the truth that White Lotus only used the star and moon ring, ignoring all the other god weapons she could inherit. As the twin witches, they could contract with multiple god weapons. This special ability of the twin witches should not be wasted like this. Even if she took 10,000 steps backward and admitted that White Lotus could use the star and moon ring as her main weapon, there were still many ancient god weapons waiting for White Lotus to inherit in the Sword Palace. Every time when Red Lotus saw the god weapons that had been sealed for thousands of years and couldn't have an appropriate master, there was an unspeakable pain in her heart. Every time when White Lotus approached those god weapons who had waited too long, these god weapons would actively emit lights and wait for her choice as if they were poor puppies waiting to be adopted. As long as she stretched out her little hand, there was no need for any inheritance ceremony. All god weapons would fly to her side. However, White Lotus still refused to choose any of them. She even refused to inherit the Green Lotus throne. Red Lotus had always wondered why her gentle sister, White Lotus, would so stubbornly refuse all the god weapons. Now she understood that her sister had already decided what she wanted. They are very, very good, but I don't like them. No matter how many god weapons I can choose, I just need one. I only want one god weapon, it's the only treasure that belongs to me. No one else could interfere with White Lotus's choices, including her sister, Red Lotus. This was the first time that Red Lotus had discovered that once her sister had decided what to do, no one could change her mind. No. No. White Lotus, you're wrong. You're wrong. That prince doesn't exist in this world. The kind of prince in the novel you read doesn't exist in the real world at all. It was just a dream after you read too many romantic novels. Why? You are so smart, why would you believe a dream? I beg you, White Lotus, give up on the star and moon ring. Even if all the god weapons in the Sword Palace can't satisfy you, I will find a better god weapon for you. Please, just put down the star and moon ring. Looking at her sister who was obsessed with the star and moon ring, continuing to pour all her spiritual power into it, Red Lotus really regretted it. I shouldn't have gone to hold the entrance exam of the Sword Palace. Whoa. If I knew that my innocent sister would fall into the delusion of love on the way, I would never have left the Sword Palace with her. Sister, do you believe in love? Even if she didn't open her eyes, White Lotus knew what look was on her sister's face. Red Lotus' compliant sister entered the period of rebellion, she must be worried about it. However, White Lotus didn't regret her choice. When she was small, White Lotus had known that she was different from her sister. From the day they were conceived in their mother's womb, they were destined never to be separated. Something twined around them, made them come into the world hand in hand from their mother's body at almost the same time. Even their mother didn't know who the big sister of the strange twins was. Finally, they regarded the baby on the left as the big sister and the baby on the right as the young sister. The Twins of Fate was not their original title. The Cursed Twins was the name they were called after their birth. Their bodies, including their hands and feet, were tightly connected by transparent threads when they were born, just like twin trees. Apparently, this situation was abnormal. When their mother saw this, she couldn't help but scream. And about the thing that happened after that, both of them didn't want to recall it anymore. By the time they appeared in front of the public again, they were already 7 years old and became the apprentices of witches. They had been given a new mission, a new life, and had completely been cut off from their past. People wouldn't ask about the past of the twin witches, doubting the sacredness of White Lotus Sword Palace. The witch who took them from the mortal world to the Sword Palace became their teacher and began to teach them the knowledge that witches should know. The Cursed Twins eventually became the respected twin witches, Red Lotus and White Lotus. People took it for granted that the respected twin witches were children raised by the witches. They had excellent talent, strong bloodline, and a fate that no one could match. After losing everything, Red Lotus and White Lotus got everything. However, White Lotus would never forget the scared expression on her mother's face when she saw them, and all the ugly things that happened after that. Yes, she remembered. She always remembered. As the yin side of the twin witches, she had a self-awareness and wisdom earlier than her sister. Her sister, Red Lotus, obtained her first talent when she was 3 years old, and White Lotus had naturally obtained hers, right after her birth. She knew all the things her sister did in order to protect her as if she was a flower in a greenhouse. She also knew why her sister hated men so much. However, is it really good to go on like this? Sister, can you really be happy with what you have done? Why are we so unfortunate and so special? As the twin witches of fate, can't we have our own destiny? Become a witch and guard the White Lotus secret treasures like all the previous witches, dedicating our lives to White Lotus Sword Domain. Is this our life? No, it shouldn't be. White Lotus wanted to destroy all of these, she wanted to get rid of such a fate. For this, she made a wish and made preparations. That day, when the glory of the stars fell, she finally found what she wanted and heard the voice that could help her fight against this so-called fate. Then she met the person she was supposed to meet. The prince who could let her get rid of the fate of the twin witches. My sister is wrong. My prince is not an illusion, neither a delusion, but right in front of me and close enough to touch. She took the gift from him and vowed to turn it into a weapon that could break all the shackles of fate. That day, she said to her prince, "Today, this my calyx is just a common stone in the eyes of other people. But from now on, it's the first gift my lover gave me. In the future, it will be the gift my husband first presented to me, and gradually will become a priceless and irreplaceable treasure in my life. I don't mind other people's opinions, but for me, it's the most beautiful and glamorous gem from my prince. I witness it here, your present is the most valuable gift to me, to complete our eternal contract. Maybe I indeed don't know what true love is, but I swear to this gem. I will love you forever." She prayed to the stars in the sky, and then, the wish came true. The golden red of the sun. The silver of the moon. The bright starlights gathered in her palm, blessed her and guided her. "Sister, have you seen it? The miracle you and I expect is right here, in this star and moon ring. We are no longer the cursed twins, no longer shouldering that heavy fate." On that day, she made an invariable pledge to him and handed over her fate to him. Prince, the miracle she was waiting for, the glory of redemption. Her prince didn't need to be rich. She just needed a gift from him, as long as the gift could represent his sincerity, even a piece of my calyx was sufficient. Her prince didn't need to be handsome and have friends all over the world. Although her prince was now so cute and had a whole group of girls to be his knights. For her, the prince was the light, the lighthouse in the darkness, the key to a new destiny. "Sister, do you like the sun?" At the end of the morning prayer ceremony, White Lotus reached out her little hand and pointed to the golden light above the waterfall. "Well, not bad." As the master of the Red Lotus Holy Sword, Red Lotus liked everything related to the fire. She even gained the power to transform herself into a flame guardian spirit in that incredible nightmare world. The sun was the ultimate symbol of the ultimate power of burning everything. "Well, I'll tell you a secret. Our prince, will one day surpass the sun and become hotter and more luminous than the sun." "Impossible, your non-existent prince won't even obtain 1/1000th of the glory of the sun." Red Lotus shook her head with a disdainful smile. She didn't believe a word of what her sisters said about the imaginary prince. "Well, sister, I'll make a bet with you." Looking at her sister's confident look, White Lotus showed a strange smile on her face. "A bet that belongs to me, to us, and to the prince. Even after 1,000 years or 10,000 years, this bet will not expire." "Sure, what bet?" Red Lotus couldn't wait to hear it. As long as it could stop her sister's fantasy about the non-existent prince, she was willing to accept 10 bets. "The bet is very simple, that is, you will fall in love with the prince." White Lotus said with a bright smile on her face. "So, as long as I don't like that prince, you'll give up that bastard?" The corners of Red Lotus' mouth raised. "I have a 100% possibility to win. How would I like a prince that doesn't exist?" Even if the prince White Lotus fantasized about really existed, she would find him and kill him before White Lotus saw him. Her Red Lotus Holy Sword had long been hungry and thirsty for the prince's blood. If the prince appeared in front of her, she would reward him with a bloody end without saying anything at all. "Yes, because I like the prince, so will you. Just as the sun rises from the horizon every day, my sister, you will like the same person I like." White Lotus's eyes were smiling, as if she had seen the final result. "Well, I accept this bet." Red Lotus quickly agreed. "Prince, you must die." Whether it was a prince in fantasy or a prince in the real world, as long as she saw him, she would kill him. So, White Lotus stretched out her right hand, while Red Lotus stretched out her left hand with a bright smile. It was a ritual between them, and it would only be used for the most important things. In the name of White Lotus, Red Lotus. Pinky, Pinky, bow bow. Whoever tells a lie will sink down to a bad place and never rise up again. The violator will swallow 1,000 needles. Two little fingers entwined together and pulled together forcefully. Red Lotus laughed happily. "My sister finally figured it out. The prince doesn't exist, how will I lose this bet?" White Lotus also had a mysterious and gentle smile on her face. "Sister, in that case, no matter where we go, we will not be separated. Our fates is indeed to be connected together with the prince." In the White Lotus Sword Palace, on the roof of the Witch Palace. May, star snow, comfortably stretched out herself, different from matured Star Thunder and energetic Star Fire. Star Snow preferred to stay in quiet places. If it wasn't necessary, she wouldn't take the initiative to come in contact with other people. After listening to the courses according to Mayer's arrangement, she easily got into the Witch Palace, where she should never be found by outsiders, and found the most suitable place for sunshine. She was ready for a good sleep here. She didn't behave like a dog at all but was more like a cat. Unfortunately, the owner of the Witch Palace soon discovered her. "Who is it?" Red Lotus looked at her and almost burst with anger. "What's this place?" The Witch Palace, the core of the whole White Lotus Sword domain, the place where the White Lotus secret treasure is hid. The defense system here was even stronger than the main peak where the White Lotus Sword Master lived. Even a mosquito shouldn't have the possibility to fly into this forbidden area. But what did she see? Someone actually got onto the roof of the shrine of the Witch Palace. And it looked like she had come here for a long time because she had fallen asleep. How absurd. Why can she pass through the defense ward of the Witch Palace? An enemy had come in. Why didn't the entire defense system send an alarm? Is it a bug? The Witch Palace spent thousands of years building the perfect defense system, and now it had actually broken down without warning. May, Star Snow, looked at Red Lotus in confusion, then she saw the figure in a white witch's dress next to Red Lotus. With a smile on her face, she jumped down from the roof lightly. "It's you." Red Lotus looked at her in surprise. Apparently, she was the core of the Starwing Knights, May. How did she get through the defense system of the Witch Palace? Even for Hua Hua, it isn't possible for her to accomplish this. White Lotus gently covered her mouth, trying not to let herself make a happy voice. "Prince, have you come to see me?" May, Star Snow, trotted all the way to White Lotus. Then she smelled White Lotus' body all around. She smelled the unique odor of her master, Yun Shi. Exactly speaking, it was part of Yun Shi's smell contained in the star and moon ring. Smiling, May, Star Snow, looked at White Lotus, smiling like an angel. "Hey," looking at May's innocent face, although White Lotus covered her mouth, she could not help but laugh out. "White Lotus, when did you have such a good relationship with this maid?" Looking at White Lotus' smile, which she seldom saw, Red Lotus, as her sister, was jealous. White Lotus rarely smiled. In fact, she often practiced her secret skill, the Great Circulation, all day. Even as her sister, Red Lotus had only a few hours a day that she could talk with White Lotus. For Red Lotus, White Lotus' smile was more precious than anything. Because of the prince in her dream, they had a quarrel and she had less and less chance to see White Lotus smile. She was like a fish that left the water and a plant that couldn't bask in the sun. If she couldn't see White Lotus smile, she would lose the meaning of her life. "That damn prince. It's all your fault." If White Lotus had that strange dream again, she would drive into her dream, pull out her sword and kill him 100 times. May. White Lotus murmured the pseudonym the prince was using now. Even such a simple action could let her feel happy. He was the fire of her life, the miracle she yearned for, the light of hope she had after praying thousands of times. "Today, you come to me. It's really a lucky day. You are the sun, glorious and sacred. You are the moon, mysterious and gentle. You are a star, bright and shining. Wait, even though your Hua was made, you can't come in here." Looking at her sister's smile, Red Lotus only felt anxious. White Lotus isn't smiling at me. The feeling of losing, as if something of great importance will soon be lost. "May, how did you get in?" White Lotus was also curious about this. Compared with her sister Red Lotus, she knew better how powerful the defense system of White Lotus Sword Palace was. It was absolutely not something that could be broken through simply by brute force. After all, it connected with the ley lines of the whole White Lotus sword domain, and even could borrow the power of the stars when necessary. Its full name was White Lotus 10 Killing Formations. If it was fully activated, its defensive power could even reach the legend rank. After being strengthened by the witches of the Witch Palace from generation to generation, its strength had long reached the level that no hero rank beings could break through. The number of times this place being invaded was 0 before today. May, Star Snow, tilted her head. She didn't know how she came in too, because she just wanted to sleep under the sun, so she naturally came to this place. There must be a problem. Are you a traitor? Explain this. How did you sneak in here? Red Lotus looked at her and subconsciously felt that something was wrong. With a flash of the flame, she summoned the Red Lotus Holy Sword and put it on May's neck. Red Lotus Holy Sword, the strongest weapon of the Witch Palace. It contained the power of the flames of heaven. Rumors said that it was a sacred sword that could burn heaven and the earth. The handle of the sword looked like a 10-leaf red lotus. Every petal showed a brilliant crimson, as if there was blood flowing on it. Sister, don't scare her. White Lotus pinched her fingers to predict, then understood how May could come in. That was too obvious. She could even see the mysterious power that covered May's body with her naked eyes. Because of that power, the defense system of the Sword Palace didn't do anything to May. The power contained a breath that was immeasurably old and full of vicissitudes, like an endless desert. In the whole of White Lotus Sword domain, only one person could be the master of that power. Is it because of this? White Lotus stretched out her slender hand and pulled out the shell necklace from May's chest. In an instant, a mysterious aura that only strong swordsmen could feel spread in the air, which in turn suppressed the burning aura of the Red Lotus Holy Sword. This is, Red Lotus's eyes changed subtly. Yes, it's Master Cassina's token, the power of the sands of time. White Lotus smelled the fragrance on the shell with a drunken look on her face. As expected, my prince is perfect, whether he is in men's or women's clothes. I understand. Sorry, I misunderstood you. Red Lotus also understood why May could pass through the defense system of the Sword Palace. Sky Swords were the most exalted people in the Sky Sword God's domain. None of the Sword Palaces would judge a Sky Sword as an enemy. The whole of the White Lotus Sword Palace was defenseless to Cassina the Battle God. It was their honor that Cassina was willing to come to the Sword Palace. The last time a Sky Sword came to the White Lotus Sword Palace was thousands of years ago. Cassina was the first Sky Sword who came to the White Lotus Sword Palace in the last 1,000 years. Even the Great Xia Imperial Palace was open to all Sky Swords, not to mention the small White Lotus Sword Palace. It's unexpected that you hold Master Cassina's token. When looking at May, Star Snow, Red Lotus even felt somewhat jealous. My sister worships Master Cassina very much. Looking at Red Lotus' expression, White Lotus quietly told her prince this important information. Master Cassina is an invincible god of battle, the invincible overlord of the Battle Gods Champion Contest. Red Lotus said with longing in her eyes. Cassina the Battle God was not just a common sky sword, she was also famous in all of the Endless Gods domains. After all, she was also the only legend-rank female swordsman who won the title of a Battle God. Not only in the Sky Sword God's domain, even in the Western God's domain and the Dragon God's domain, but there were also countless women who worshipped her. Red Lotus was also one of them. She was Cassina's biggest fan. When she first saw Cassina on the Water God's fantastic island, she was so nervous that she could hardly speak. After that, when traveling with Cassina, Red Lotus often consulted Cassina about how to improve her fighting skills, and got a lot of instructions from Cassina. Originally, the power of the legend rank should be beyond the boundaries that any hero-ranked beings could understand. However, Cassina's martial arts was one of the few exceptions. After all, martial arts was the power that was created for weak human beings to challenge strong enemies. After being taught by Cassina, Red Lotus respected her more. Seeing that May had Cassina's token, Red Lotus' attitude also changed. "Sister, it's your fault, so apologize." Finding that her sister Red Lotus was feeling guilty, White Lotus showed a strange smile on her face and lightly pushed her sister. "Well, it was my fault. I apologize. Do you need any compensation?" After knowing the reason why May could come in, Red Lotus also felt that her attitude just now was too bad. "I think it would be good for May to attend our sacrificial ceremony." Sacrificial ceremony. Red Lotus frowned first, then nodded and said, "No problem. It's suitable to be a compensation." The sacrificial ceremony of the Witch Palace was a very solemn and sacred ceremony, and not everyone was eligible to participate in it. Almost all noble families in the Sky Sword God's domain wanted to attend the sacrificial ceremony of the witches, but only very few of them could succeed. Why were they so enthusiastic about this? Because the sacrificial ceremony was a special prayer of the Witch Palace, the people who attend this ceremony could get some incredible experience, and even have a small chance to improve their talent. Although the chance was slim, however, there were only a handful of ways in the endless God's domain could improve a person's talent, and the costs of most of them was so huge that very few people dared to try. The sacrificial ceremony of the Witch Palace was one of the methods that you didn't need to pay a too huge price. So long as they took part in it, they would have 10% of the possibility to strengthen their talent. Not only in the Sky Sword God's domain, in the whole of the Eastern God's domain and even the distant Western God's domain, many famous families knew this. It was said that the sacrificial ceremonies of the several most famous witches in the next 100 years had all been reserved by these noble families. Red Lotus and White Lotus just started to learn the sacrificial ceremony this year, and they succeeded in their practice not long ago. The news hadn't been spread yet, otherwise, the Witch Palace wouldn't be so quiet now. The sacrificial ceremony was a prayer and a way of practice for witches. The sacrificial ceremony could only be performed once a month and would last about 3 days. There were various taboos in the sacrificial ceremony, and once the sacrificial ceremony started, no one could stop it. Otherwise, the witches who held the sacrificial ceremony would get hurt, including vomiting blood and even being cursed. Because of this, the sacrificial ceremony was a ceremony that all witches should keep practicing throughout their lives, and the assistants who could participate in it must be strictly selected. Most of the time, witches weren't willing to let any outsiders attend the sacrificial ceremony, especially the young witches who had just learned how to perform the sacrificial ceremony. In order to keep their mind clean, they were not allowed to be disturbed by anything. However, Red Lotus didn't mind letting May take part in the ceremony, because she wasn't alone. Her sister White Lotus would help her in the ceremony. White Lotus was naturally good at all kinds of magic arts. Even the defense system of the Witch Palace had been revised by her and increased its power by 30%. Unlike Red Lotus, who was good at fighting, White Lotus was known for her wisdom and understanding about magic arts. Because White Lotus had such a great talent, so that they could be qualified to hold the sacrificial ceremony at this young age. This was the highest level of spiritual practice of the Witch Palace. Even after reaching the legend rank, it wouldn't be antiquated. In fact, in the sacrificial ceremony, White Lotus herself was the one who held the ceremony, and Red Lotus was just White Lotus' assistant. May, Star Snow, looked at White Lotus with curiosity. Her head slightly cocked. "It will take 3 days to prepare the ceremony. You are recognized by Master Cassina, therefore, in return for her, I have to let you know what the sacrificial ceremony means, so that you can get the greatest benefit." Red Lotus and White Lotus walked together in the garden of the Witch Palace. White Lotus held May's hand and Red Lotus explained what the sacrificial ceremony was for May. The sacrificial ceremony is a top-level secret skill of god witches. From ancient times, our witches used it to communicate with the creatures that didn't exist in our world. Sacrificial ceremony, literally, this is a way to present sacrifices to the gods. However, we can't make sure who the god is. Most of the time, we can summon a good, kind god, but sometimes, some horrible creatures would also respond to the sacrificial ceremony. Good gods will bless us. Unknown, horrible creatures will bring curses. Occasionally, some neutral creatures would also respond to the ceremony, trading with us. After being improved by witches from generation to generation, the chances of being cursed have been greatly reduced. Most creatures who respond to our summons are friendly gods or fantastic creatures. Improving the participator's talent is one of the side effects of the sacrificial ceremony. If the god or creature appeared on the sacrificial altar has the same type of energy as you will have the opportunity to absorb a part of their auras to enhance your own talent. The probability is about 10% and works for all hero-ranked beings. Invite the god, then send the god away. This was the special ability of the witches, and the way to communicate with many creatures in other worlds was the top secret of the witches in the Endless Gods domain. The Witch Palace in the White Lotus Sword domain was just a small branch of the god witches in the Endless Gods domains. The history of the god witches was said to be even longer than the establishment of the Endless Gods domains. It was an ancient force that existed before the first star bridge was built. Sister, have you decided what god you want to summon this time? Holding her prince's hand, White Lotus looked calm, but her fast heartbeat had exposed her true mood. The prince's hand is so warm. Well, like last time, I want to summon a fire-type god or fantastic creature. Actually, Red Lotus wasn't good at the sacrificial ceremony. She was only responsible for offering her spiritual power for White Lotus in the ceremony. Nobody knows how many super beings exist in the Endless Gods domains, just as nobody knows the margin of the starry world. In the endless worlds, there were endless gods. The existence they could summon depended on the rank of the sacrifices, which was one of the reasons why witches had to let noble families take part in the ceremony. After all, the sacrifices that could entertain a god wouldn't be cheap. No, I think we can summon a stronger god this time. White Lotus said confidently and stroked the prince's soft hands. Well, but isn't the sacrifice just a fire-type ruby? Red Lotus looked at her sister with a confused look. Although she was not very proficient in the sacrificial ceremony, at least, she knew the basic principles of the ceremony. The quality of the sacrifices determined the level of the gods that could be summoned in the sacrificial ceremony. Which meant, to summon a stronger god, they must prepare a more precious sacrifice. Rumors said that in the similar rituals of black magic, in order to summon a powerful evil spirit, dark wizards would even kill millions of people as blood sacrifices. Naturally, witches wouldn't use such a bloody method, they preferred to use valuable sacrifices. After trying endless summons, god witches had found some relationships between the sacrifices and the gods they summoned. If the sacrifice was a fire-type ruby, it would probably be a fire-type spirit who responded to their summon, and there was a small probability that a giant dragon would respond to them. Obsidian was not recommended as a sacrifice, because only dark-type evil spirits liked this kind of sacrifices. If it wasn't necessary, none of the witches would use an obsidian as a sacrifice. The principle of equivalence exchange was also working in the sacrificial ceremony. Therefore, the witches must pay attention to their endurance when they performed the sacrificial ceremony. In their long history, a witch once mistook a rare star-type obsidian as an ordinary obsidian. As a result, she summoned an indescribable, horrible existence and was devoured by it. Of course, it was a very rare exception. Most witches who performed the sacrificial invitation would prepare sacrifices that matched their own strength. They wouldn't let the situation get out of their control. This time, according to previous experience, the sacrifice prepared by Red Lotus was a ruby containing a lot of flame spirits. Therefore, the existence who would respond to their call would naturally be a fire-type god or fantastic creature. No, we won't use the ruby, I have a better sacrifice this time. White Lotus looked at May confidently. The prince is the incarnation of a miracle and the glory of hope. She could do anything as long as she was with the prince. Do we have that kind of thing? Red Lotus was confused. White Lotus sword domain was just a small, remote sword domain. That ruby was almost the highest quality sacrifice they could find. Yes, it was a gift from the water god, Hydra. White Lotus took out a milky white gem with a hazy mist inside. At first glance, it was just an ordinary gem. However, if you kept looking at it, you would find that the interior of the gem was constantly changing. The hazy fog in the gem changed from huge mountains to vast oceans, presenting an all-embracing scene. Cryolite. Red Lotus was shocked after realizing what the precious gem in White Lotus's hand was. Compared with the fire-type ruby she prepared, the level of cryolite was far higher. The fire-type ruby in her hand could be the material used to forge the highest level of fire-type god weapon. However, the cryolite in White Lotus's hand could be embedded in a real god weapon without any extra steps. It was a treasure that could only be obtained from real fantastic creatures or gods. Before humans understood the concept of a god weapon, gods were using this kind of materials to forge original god weapons. Compared with this, the fire-type ruby she prepared before was just nothing. What was more precious was that the cryolite was one of the most suitable sacrifices for the sacrificial ceremony. It could almost guarantee a 100% chance to communicate with a random high-level extraordinary existence, and all the beings of the three camps, good, neutral and evil, all liked it. Even amongst gods, it could be used as money. From this point, its rarity was self-evident. Isn't that too wasteful? It's cryolite. Even in Red Lotus eyes, the cryolite was too precious to be a sacrifice. Its price couldn't be counted by money. After all, only gods or fantastic creatures could make cryolite, and money was meaningless to gods and fantastic creatures. Gods and fantastic creatures both had the ability to change the material constitution from the molecular level, which was the so-called touch a stone and turn it into gold. Therefore, none of the mortal wealth such as gold and silver were valuable to them. Only these gems contained the free energy of the universe. For example, the fire-type ruby would let some gods feel interested in it. This kind of fire-type ruby was generally accumulated in the ley lines after tens of millions of years. Even in a large gem vein, there would be only a few fire-type gems. Even gods couldn't control time, therefore, the fire spirit contained in the ruby was the core of the sacrificial ceremony. Ordinary rubies had no such effect at all. The last time, White Lotus used a fire-type ruby as the sacrifice, and successfully summoned a fire-type fantastic creature. By absorbing the fire power of the fantastic creature, the power of Red Lotus' holy sword was greatly improved. Yes, since it's an apology, we should show our sincerity. White Lotus narrowed her eyes habitually and smiled at her sister, which was gazing at her with a confused look. She knew that her sister would agree in the end. Ah, you're really being self-willed, but since it's a cryolite, there should be no problem. As White Lotus had expected, although Red Lotus frowned, she finally agreed to her sister's request. Apart from any things related to the prince, Red Lotus's love for her sister was unconditional. She would be willing to meet any of White Lotus' demands. Yes, anything apart from the prince. The prince must die. Thank you, sister. I'm also looking forward to what we can summon in the sacrificial ceremony. White Lotus smiled with her eyes squinted. The cryolite was her gift for the prince from the beginning. In order to obtain it, she had also made a deal with the water god, Hydra. She just didn't expect that she would be able to use it this soon. With the power of miracle from the prince, what kinds of existences could see the bright light of the cryolite? She was also curious about this in her heart. May, Star Snow, looked at White Lotus in confusion. She didn't understand why White Lotus was holding her hands so tightly. I want to bask in the sun. Under the ground of the Witch Palace, there was an altar, which had the highest secrecy level of the whole White Lotus Sword Palace. The altar of deity. Amongst all the witch palaces all over the endless gods' domains, there must be such a forbidden place, where it was used for witches to pray and communicate with gods. In different worlds, the altar of deity built by the witches would take on different features. This altar in the White Lotus Sword domain was an ancient altar full of the style of the Eastern gods' domain. The most central part of the altar was a pattern of yin-yang twin fish, showing the principle of both rigidity and softness. Around the pattern of yin-yang twin fish, there was a circle of blooming lotus petals, which looked pure and flawless. Above the altar of deity, there was a pattern of the sun, moon, mountains and rivers, which symbolized the belief of the Eastern gods' domain. At the same time, there was an ancient sword piercing through the sky. It was a mark left by Yunhai the sword master, which represented that the altar of deity was blessed by him, a sky sword. Witches didn't believe in a certain god, but would choose the most suitable god according to the rules of their own world, and build the altar of deity that was suitable for the style of their world. If a witch was strong enough, the witch herself could also be summoned by other witches. God witches weren't the puppets of gods, but a special force formed by women who had the ability to communicate with gods. They respected gods, but they weren't puppets. They were good at communicating with gods and generally, they would guard the world they were born in. If it wasn't necessary, they wouldn't leave their own world. The witch palaces existed in many worlds in the endless gods' domains. The witches were a special scene of many gods' domains. They believed that there were 8 million gods in the world, and even a stalk of grass, a piece of wood or a road contained the possibility to become a god. Witches were the earliest channels of communication between humans and gods. Before the first star bridge was built, they had already taken root in a lot of gods' domains, taking on the task of communication between humans and gods. Many witches, because of their friendly relationship with the gods, would even be chosen as apostles of the gods, becoming the spokespersons of the gods in the mortal world. Red Lotus and White Lotus were the witches blessed by gods. Their talents were so great that a special existence chose them to be its alternate apostles. Even the imperial family of the Great Xia Sword domain would treat them with great honor. Sister, are you ready? White Lotus sat in the center of the altar of deity, the star and moon ring on her hand radiated a soft glow. In an instant, she entered an incredible realm of emptiness. With her eyes narrowed, she realized that she had left the real world and entered a gap between dream and reality. Will we really use the cryolite as the sacrifice? Red Lotus still felt that it was too wasteful to use the precious cryolite in this sacrificial ceremony. After all, even if the sacrificial ceremony failed, they would still pay a price. If they used the cryolite but summoned nothing, it would really be a great loss. Moreover, it was easy to summon a god but was difficult to send the god away. Every year, there would be witches who unluckily died in the sacrificial ceremony. In any case, before starting the sacrificial ceremony, witches would adjust their mind to the best state and prepare the best sacrifices at the same time. Once a month was the minimum time for a talented witch to recover her energy and strength. In fact, most witches could only hold the sacrificial ceremony 1 or 2 times in a year. Even if they had done everything they could do, there would still be a small chance that they summoned monsters that should never appear in the real world. Yes, I want to challenge myself this time. I think that this time, we can summon a very special god. White Lotus looked at May with a confident look, although May was yawning with a bored look. Well, be careful. If something goes wrong, stop the sacrificial ceremony as quick as you can. Red Lotus found that her sister was strangely persistent today. It's too strange. She wasn't such a stubborn person before. Do we really need to compensate for that, maid? Even so, it would be sufficient just to use the fire-type ruby as the sacrifice. Then, get ready to sacrifice. White Lotus would not tell her sister that the cryolite was prepared for the prince from the very beginning. Okay. Red Lotus had to raise her hands helplessly. All things, all gods in the endless gods' domains, listen to my voice. Along with White Lotus's whisper, the most mysterious ceremony of the witches began. What was going on now was the first stage of the ceremony, sacrifice, displaying the sacrifice in front of those old, powerful existences. It was equal to telling them, hey, there is a gift for you. Come here. In the infinite time and worlds, all things that are immortal, I present my gift to you, praying that you can pay attention to this corner. The pattern of the yin-yang twin fish started rotating, spreading the auras of the twin witches. I present this treasure to you, and if you are satisfied with it, please respond to my voice and come to this altar. The cryolite became transparent bit by bit. It was the sign that it was being wrapped around by the power of contract, turning into an equivalent exchange. Language and cognition. Behavior and phenomenon. Heart and body. Bleeding my blood as a witness, I'm looking forward to your coming. White Lotus stretched out her arm. Her fingertip cut her skin, letting a drop of blood fall to the altar. Red Lotus also stretched out her arm and pricked her skin, presenting her blood for the ceremony. This was the second reason why witches needed to rest for a month after holding a sacrificial ceremony. May, Star Snow, blinked her eyes and looked at the twin witches in confusion. It's your turn. If you want to get the benefits, you must pay with your blood first. Red Lotus quickly pricked May's fingertip using her Red Lotus holy sword. A drop of crimson blood dripped to the ground. The humans who take part in the sacrificial ceremony must present their blood as the price, otherwise, they wouldn't be able to absorb the god's aura in the ceremony and improve themselves. The principle of equivalent exchange was a basic rule in any world. What you want is what you must pay for. The sacrificial ceremony was already one of the safest methods to improve one's talent in the endless gods' domains. Although the success rate was only about 1/10, most of the time, a failure will only cost a drop of blood, therefore, it was actually a highly profitable business. Of course, there was also a probability in the world called bad luck. The unfortunate witch who summoned the nightmare was a living negative example. Red Lotus's blood fell on the cryolite and emitted a red, fire-like light, which is also the embodiment of her essence, the privilege of the Sun Witch. White Lotus's blood was on the contrary. When her blood dripped onto the cryolite, it immediately turned transparent and in an instant, it merged with the mist in the cryolite. As for May's blood, actually, Yunxi's blood, it had undergone a very strange change when it dripped onto the cryolite. At first, it was a pale gold light floating in the cryolite. Then, the cryolite became hotter and hotter, scorching the air. After a long while, the transparent cryolite, which was filled with mist, had become a beautiful golden red gem. No one would believe that it was a cryolite just a moment ago. It's not the same as last time. Red Lotus murmured in a confused tone. She looked at the gem, whose color and even size had completely been changed. If she hadn't witnessed the whole process, she wouldn't believe that a cryolite could transform into a golden red gem. It's normal, because it's cryolite. White Lotus narrowed her eyes and told the lie with a straight face. After absorbing my prince's blood, the cryolite would naturally change. I would feel strange if it didn't change. Anyway, my sister knows nothing about the sacrificial ceremony. No matter what I say, she won't doubt my words. Moreover, it wasn't a lie. After all, I just said, because it's cryolite. So, is it the sacrifice this time? Red Lotus sensed a distinct aura from the golden red gem. She could vaguely feel the power inside it, which was far superior to the power of that valuable fire-type ruby. With it, we can summon a god that is far stronger than that fantastic creature last time. Yes, this is a sacrifice from May, and my sister and I. When we open the door tomorrow, which god will appear in front of us? I'm really looking forward to it. White Lotus placed the golden red gem in the center of the altar and prayed. The sacrifice has been delivered. After 1 day and 1 night, I look forward to your arrival. No matter where you come from, we welcome you. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night. The golden red gem suspended in the middle of the altar of deity gradually became transparent. In about 10 seconds, the gem completely disappeared from the altar of deity, which was a sign that the first stage of the sacrificial ceremony had succeeded. I'm exhausted. After this sacrificial ceremony, I must rest for several months. After making sure the sacrifice had been offered smoothly, Red Lotus complained and moved her stiff right hand. If she hadn't drew out her sword and cut May's fingertip, the sacrificial ceremony would have failed at that time. Because her sister White Lotus was slightly anemic, the blood she bled was actually 3 times more than Red Lotus, so she was tired. Fortunately, she was the Sun Witch, her natural vitality was several times more than White Lotus. Therefore, she would recover quicker from the tiredness. Compared with her own tiredness, she paid more attention to her sister. She clearly saw that after the sacrificial ceremony, White Lotus' face was somewhat paler than usual. Yes, she realized later that holding a high-level sacrificial ceremony was also a heavy burden on the witches themselves. Although there was no record that a cryolite would attract any dangerous beings, it was always wise to play it safe. This was only the second time White Lotus had held a sacrificial ceremony. Is it too risky to use cryolite as a sacrifice? White Lotus, are you tired? Red Lotus looked nervously at her sister White Lotus, whose face looked as pale as paper. The spiritual power I consumed was much greater than I had expected. White Lotus didn't tell the truth. The burden of sacrificing this golden red gem had almost drained her spiritual power. The process of turning the golden red gem into a sacrifice and sending it to the altar almost emptied her whole body. There was no doubt that this was not the normal consumption for sacrificing a cryolite. Just as her sister Red Lotus, whose vitality was 10 times more than any normal person, as the Moon Witch, her spiritual power was also 10 times more than any others, which was sufficient enough to afford the consumption of her spiritual power sacrificing a cryolite. With such a high price, this time, what on earth will be summoned? The prince's blood is indeed unusual. Let's go. Go to rest. Looking at her sister's tired face, Red Lotus was panicked and hurried away with White Lotus from the altar of deity. May, Star Snow, looked at the altar and went out to bask in the sun happily. Basking in the sun is still the most comfortable thing to do. After running back to the roof of the witch palace and laying down, May, Star Snow, was satisfied facing the sun. Until the sun went down and the night screen had hung down, she reluctantly jumped off the roof of the witch palace and began to look for a place to stay overnight. Star Snow was actually a natural ice-type creature. In theory, she should like cold places. However, she preferred to bask in the sun. She liked all the places that could let her feel warm. After sunset, she wandered around in the witch palace and finally found a truth: she had lost her way. It was not because she was a road fool, but because the structure of the witch palace was full of trees, gardens, and dazzling corridors, which was too complex to her brains to remember the way. May, Star Snow, stood her ground and looked foolishly at the corridor, which was actually leading in 8 directions. What should I do now? Smiling. It seems useless now. Mayor and Yunshi had not yet had time to teach her the skills to find the right path in such a complex situation. Finally, desperate Star Snow could only follow the only familiar scent here, walking in a completely unfamiliar direction. Soon, she came to a room in the Witch Palace, where only the twin witches of fate could enter, which was the bedroom of Red Lotus and White Lotus. It was just because she couldn't find any place to sleep. It must be because of the will of the universe. On the big bed, the twin witches had fallen asleep and were protected by a special guardian magic circle. Nothing could invade into the magic circle and disturb the twin witches' sleep. After having consumed a great deal of energy and blood, both of the twin witches, White Lotus and Red Lotus, needed to sleep to recover themselves. Therefore, this room was closely protected by the magic circle. Unfortunately, it wouldn't work against the person who held Cassina's token. After wandering in a circle in the room, May, Star Snow, found several pastries. She gracefully nibbled on the snow-white pastries and nodded her head satisfactorily. To be fair, Star Snow's performance was definitely the best one amongst the 3 sisters, because she had perfectly met all the requirements from Mayor. She just looked for a quiet place to bask in the sun, didn't talk with any girls of the Starwing Knights, and even walked into the Witch Palace, where it was so sacred that no one apart from witches could come in. If the twin witches hadn't found her, what she did would have really been perfect. Unfortunately, no matter how perfect she had been, once night came, there would be a big problem. Where to sleep? Puff. Ah. After stretching herself, Star Snow convinced that she had successfully accomplished the task today, and her master seems to be coming back soon. Star Snow looked around and ran to the bed of the twin witches. The magic circle was literally nothing to May, who held Cassina's token. A lady should sleep in bed at night. This was one of the basic knowledge Mayor taught the 3 sisters of the Star Spirit team. Naturally, Star Snow complied with it 100%. But, to her surprise, why did her hands naturally move when she got into bed and lay down beside the twin witches? In less than 10 seconds, the hands themselves had taken off Red Lotus witch clothes, leaving only a red band on her hair. As her witch clothes were stripped, Red Lotus' beautiful, snow-white body was totally exposed in the air, spreading the unique fragrance of the girl. Looking at Red Lotus' white and tender skin, smooth and slender legs, May, Star Snow, stretched out her hands with curiosity. After being stripped of her red witch dress, exposing her delicate legs to the air, it was difficult to imagine that their master, Red Lotus, was actually a girl of strong personality when she was awake. May's hand gently rubbed and pinched Red Lotus' slender and delicate white toes. Her pink toenails glittered like shells on the beach, giving May, Star Snow, a too strong temptation. White Lotus. Don't believe that the prince really exists in the world. Without you, I would have nothing. In her sleep, Red Lotus' cherry-like mouth was half open and half closed, and it seemed that she was entreating for something. No, it's itchy. There, don't touch that place. Her cherry-color lips shivered slightly as she breathed. May, Star Snow, only looked at her master's hands in confusion. Why are my master's hands so skilled? Well, that was all, master. That was what Star Thunder, Star Fire, and Star Snow did when you were playing Star Go. Well, they did a good job, didn't they? Congratulations. After replaying all the pictures about what the 3 sisters did in the last 3 days, May was proud of her subordinates. It's over. It's all over. Yunshi hid his head in his arms. At this moment, he only wished that he had the supreme power to cut off the river of time, wiping out the whole of the last 3 days from the river of time. In front of him, Red Lotus was still sleeping, while White Lotus squinted her eyes, staring at him with a strange smile. Besides him, close to his hands, Red Lotus' beautiful, flawless body was slightly trembling as if she was in a sweet dream. "Don't worry, sister, White Lotus will always be with you. You are the best sister in the world, I love you." Looking at the scene in front of him, Yunshi could find no way to deceive himself that it was just a dream. Everything was real. In the last 3 days, he had really made so many mistakes. Oh, my dream to be an upright gentleman. This day, Yunshi abandoned himself to despair. It's over. My life is all over. While Yunshi watched the pictures of the first day, he still held great hope. Until Star Thunder went the wrong way to the secret garden of the Starwing Knights, and met Lulu there. Lulu became the first victim. Then Ling Ling and Meilon were also added to the victim list. The next day, Starfire took over his body and was soon caught by Huayu. Apparently, as the leader of the Starwing Knights, Huayu noticed that Starfire, was in a strange mood. Looking at this scene, an emotion called hope emerged again in Yunshi's heart. Huayu was a perfect knight, and her strength was enough for her to protect herself. Under her protection, there should be nothing happening. Unfortunately, Yunshi still guessed wrong. It was true that Huayu had the strength to stop Mei, but she did nothing. Instead, she became the 4th person on the victim list. The symptoms of Mei poisoning was still spreading. On the 3rd day, when Yunshi fought against Norn the god of wisdom and Orfina the ruby dragon on the chessboard, Star Snow possessed his body. Unlike Star Thunder and Star Fire, Star Snow avoided contact with any people from the beginning and chose to bask in the sun in the Witch Palace. In theory, she would never meet any of the members of the Starwing Knights there. Well, that was right. She didn't meet any of the members of the Starwing Knights, but the twin witches lived there. Next, Yunshi could only watch the pictures that Star Snow was brought into the underground of the Witch Palace and performed the mysterious sacrificial ceremony with the twin witches. After everything was done, Star Snow had a chance to escape from here, but unfortunately, she lost her way. Yunshi didn't want to remember what happened next. Anyway, when he opened his eyes, he was already on the big bed of the twin witches, being watched by White Lotus. What a big crisis. There's no way back. There's no chance to argue. But it wasn't my fault. How could I know what happened in the real world when I was playing Star Go on the Starry Sky chessboard? Sorry. I really am not. Yunshi looked at White Lotus with tears in his eyes. From the twin witch's point of view, he was undoubtedly an intruder, a pervert. My prince, is the close mouth Zen over? White Lotus squinted her eyes and smiled at Yunshi, enjoying his dumbstruck look. You know Yunshi shivered all over. Apart from Hua, there should be no one knowing his real identity in the White Lotus Sword Palace. If anyone knew that he was a man who lurked in the girls' dorm, he would be wanted by the whole of the White Lotus Sword Palace. Yes, because of this thing, I knew it from the beginning. White Lotus glanced at the star and moon ring on her hand with a gentle look. Why did she give up inheriting any of the god weapons of the Witch Palace and choose the star and moon ring to be her weapon? The reason was simple, fetters.o. She wanted it to be a fetter that could connect her with her prince forever. No matter what the prince became, she could find him at a glance. Even if there were 100 billion people, he was the only one she could see in her eyes. She wanted nobody but the prince. This ring is, Yunshi looked at the ring in confusion. He didn't understand what it was. Did it have any relationship with me? Is it a god weapon that can trace back time? So she can see through my real body at a glance. Are the twin witches of fate so powerful? Can they actually use such a strong god weapon? This is the gift from you, my prince. Don't you remember the first gift you gave me? White Lotus gently touched the star and moon ring, which was connected with her blood. She had signed a blood contract with it. Once the star and moon ring was broken, she would die with it. This was the way princesses expressed their trust in their lovers in ancient times. Ignoring the limitation of materials, turning impossibility into possibility. Only a talented god witch like her could master this power. After pouring her life and soul into the ring, it was finally forged. Ha! Yunshi was surprised. It was a gift from me. Why don't I remember it? Even if it didn't contain any special abilities, judging from its gorgeous appearance, it was undoubtedly a priceless treasure. Speaking of the gift I gave White Lotus, wasn't it just a mycalix I found from the hot spring? How could the star and moon ring on White Lotus' hand be the same thing as the mycalix? My prince, don't doubt it. This is your gift, the most beautiful treasure in the world. White Lotus's voice was sweet and warm, like delicious honey. Initially, it was just a mycalix. I presented my blood and soul, and made it what it is. What it means is that the sun, the moon, and the stars will never be separated. Therefore, I named it the Star and Moon Ring. Yunshi looked at White Lotus in surprise, and finally remembered what she had said when he gave her the mycalix as a gift. Today, this mycalix is just a common stone in the eyes of other people. But from now on, it's the first gift my lover gave me. In the future, it will be the gift my husband first presented to me, and gradually will become a priceless and irreplaceable treasure in my life. I don't mind other people's ideas, but for me, it's the most beautiful and glitzy gem from my prince. I witness it here, your present is the most valuable gift to me, to complete our eternal contract. Maybe I indeed don't know what true love is, but I swear to this gem. I will love you forever. So, it wasn't just a girl's fantasy, but her vow. She really turned that mycalix into her irreplaceable treasure, the most beautiful and dazzling gemstone in the world. Red Lotus frowned in her dream as her skin flushed red. It seemed that she was about to wake up. Too bad. Yunshi looked at Red Lotus' naked body, sweating heavily. If Red Lotus woke up at this moment, he wouldn't be able to purge himself of suspicion. Fortunately, Yunshi's most powerful ally in the Witch Palace was beside him. Sister, 1 sheep, 2 sheep, 3 sheep. White Lotus approached her sister's ear and began counting sheep in a gentle voice. If it was anyone else, this trick was undoubtedly ineffective, but for Red Lotus, only when White Lotus played this trick, Red Lotus would fall asleep again. White Lotus. Bah. Hearing her cute sister's voice, Red Lotus contentedly turned over on the bed, putting her left hand on White Lotus' right hand and slept more soundly. Looking at Red Lotus, who fell into sleep again, Yunshi didn't even dare to breathe. But, because Red Lotus turned her back to Yunshi, he could clearly see her naked, snow-white back, which was even more attractive than when she was facing Yunshi. 99 sheep. White Lotus showed an expression of reassurance on her face while smoothly covering her sister with a sheet, and then smiled at Yunshi, whose face had totally turned red. My prince, is my sister's body pretty? This. Well, Yunshi's forehead was covered with sweat. Answer, pretty, meant that he has seen their bodies all over when they were sleeping. Apparently, this was a death penalty if he dared to say it. Answer, not pretty, was like plugging one's ears while stealing a bell, which it was impossible to deceive White Lotus. Whichever answer was wrong. Accurately speaking, since the moment he entered the twin witch's bedroom, he was already a sinner. At this time, as a person who had committed a crime of offending the twin witches, what kind of expression should he put on his face? Probably when the condemned criminals were sent under guard to the gallows, they held the same mood in their hearts. Sister hates men very, very, very much. Therefore, my prince, you have to be careful. Never expose your true identity in front of my sister. To Yunxi, White Lotus' voice was like a light of redemption in the darkness. Does it mean that she will not reveal my true identity to others? Of course, I will keep it a secret for you, my prince. A good woman should be devoted to supporting her lover. Isn't it a natural thing? White Lotus squinted at Yunxi and betrayed her sister without hesitation. Her happiness was her sister's happiness. The twin witches were inseparable, they were two souls of one fate. Their relationship was closer than any twins in the world. They were destined to live together forever. Therefore, her prince would also become her sister's prince. Red Lotus and White Lotus would not be separated. She had found her happiness, therefore, she hoped that her sister could get happiness too. Ah, Yunxi breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed that at least, White Lotus was on his side. The real problem was her sister, Red Lotus. He didn't even dare to imagine how angry Red Lotus would be if she knew the truth. Why do you like me? After feeling relaxed, more doubts emerged in Yunxi's heart. He had had very few contacts with Red Lotus and White Lotus. The closest contact was the moment when White Lotus played the role of Sleeping Beauty in the dark forest. Looking back on that kiss, Yunxi couldn't say for sure that whether it was Red Lotus or White Lotus he kissed in the trial world. However, the taste of the soft and fragrant lips still lingered in his mind. And because of that kiss, his fate was totally changed and he had to step on a road that had no return. The prince is the prince. I've been waiting for you to show up for a long time. Like the sleeping princess in the dark forest, waiting for the prince's kiss to lift the curse. My sister and I have been waiting for our prince for too long a time. White Lotus' eyes gradually become sad. My prince, don't you like us? Now that you have woken us up from the dark forest, please expose your love to us. Just as flowers need sunshine, we also need your love to grow well and become the only flower in the world to blossom for you. Yunxi looked at White Lotus' eyes and had a feeling of guilt in his heart. It's different from what you said, the great stars. Why didn't she forget the experience in the trial world? Why is she so persistent and even fanatical? Wasn't it just a dream? Prince, do you think dreams are just dreams? White Lotus saw through the confusion in Yunxi's heart at a glance and shook her head. Her prince, indeed, did not understand. Dream is the manifestation of a human's deepest consciousness, it's the most essential part of the human mind. Why did they become cursed princesses, sleeping in the dark forest in the dream? Because that was what they really looked like. The twin witches of fate were also the cursed twin witches. They could never enjoy the same simple life like any ordinary people in the universe. If they hadn't been recognized as the god witches, they would be monsters in the eyes of the public. They had the great talent that could make countless people envy, also, they were carrying the equivalent curse on their back. Amongst other witches, there were also people who said that they were monsters that should never exist. My sister didn't say anything, but she kept on practicing desperately, trying to get beyond everything. Just like Cassina the battle god, who is strong enough to ignore all gossips. Like a red lotus blooming in hell, my sister has already embarked on a road of no return. And I have also made the same choice, practicing the forbidden skill, the great circulation. From this point of view, they deserve to be the twin witches. They had the same stubbornness in their hearts, and they both wanted to fight against their cursed fate. Prince, no matter how many times, I will repeat the same oath. I love you, and this is definitely not a joke. To us, you are the sun and hope. You're my prince. I won't look at any other man except you. Maybe I don't know anything about love, but I swear that I will do everything I can to love you and never stop until I die. Yunxi was completely speechless. It was not his fault. He was just a fake prince. However, the twin witches were even more exalted than any princess in the mortal world. It was just a chance encounter in the trial world. Why did it lead to this? Great stars, can you tell me how to deal with this kind of thing? Isn't it easy, master? That's where the goal is. Mayer's voice quietly appeared in Yunxi's ears, as if she was saying a thing that was as natural as, why climb the mountain? Because it's there. I can't deal with the twin witches. It's too dangerous to get in touch with them. Yunxi shook his head. In his heart, he was still surprised by the truth that White Lotus fell in love with him at first sight. Hua Hua once told him how dangerous the twin witches were. Little Shi, the most dangerous people in the White Lotus Sword domain is not the White Lotus Sword Master, but the twin witches. If they cooperate with each together, I'm not sure if I can beat them down. Probably in the whole of the White Lotus Sword domain, they are the strongest under the legend rank. This was the first time for Yunxi hearing that Hua Hua was praising someone. It was hard to imagine that even Hua Hua would praise the twin witches, which was full evidence that the twin witches were far stronger than their appearances. If their enemies regarded them as common hero-ranked witches, they would definitely regret their ignorance. After really touching the realm of the hero rank, Yunxi realized what a powerful ability flying was. The twin witches could fly in the sky when they were together, which was a super strong ability that most hero-ranked beings dreamed of. Judging from Yunxi's current power, even Red Lotus could kill him alone, not to mention to fight against the twin witches together. Even if White Lotus really liked him and wouldn't do anything, Red Lotus was still a strong enemy. Master, you have defeated a lot of legend-ranked beings on the Starry Sky chessboard. Why are you still afraid of the twin witches? They are just at the hero rank. Mayer felt confused. I thought that the Starry Sky chessboard was just a game. After recalling his achievement on the Starry Sky chessboard, even Yunxi himself was dumbfounded. It was a truth that he had defeated a lot of legend-ranked beings in the game. However, he was in the real world now. It wasn't even possible for him to sit as equals at the same table with any legend-ranked people in the real world. Now, although he was already a hero-ranked baker now, his combat power hadn't reached the hero rank. After all, it was impossible to defeat any person by holding a loaf of bread in his hand. Prince, it's time. Please go out and wait for us outside. Looking at Yunxi's face, White Lotus realized that her prince hadn't really understood her love. Never mind, love can't be proved by speaking. She would use her actions to make the prince understand that her love for him was definitely not just saying so. At dawn, Yunxi snuck out of the twin witch's bedroom. Oh, precious fresh air. Smelling the fresh air, Yunxi was relieved and even wanted to shout in the witch palace, love is dear, freedom is dearer. It was too dangerous to stay with the twin witches on the bed. If Red Lotus woke up, he would definitely be killed. Master, why are you so afraid of the twin witches? Speaking of danger, your childhood sweetheart, Hua Hua is apparently more dangerous. Mayer didn't understand Yunxi's fear. Mayer, Hua Hua is different from Red Lotus and White Lotus. If Hua Hua gets angry, I can soothe her with bread. Her anger comes and goes quickly. As long as I stay with her, her anger will soon disappear. Yunxi had had rich experience dealing with his childhood sweetheart. No matter how angry Hua Hua was, he was confident that he could comfort her. But Red Lotus was different. She would definitely draw out her sword if she found anything strange. Yunxi never wanted to provoke such an enemy in his life. If Red Lotus knew my real identity, she wouldn't stop chasing me before I'm torn to pieces. She is totally different from White Lotus. Mayer thought for a while and drew a conclusion, that is to say, putting Red Lotus aside, that you like White Lotus, don't you? Yunxi didn't say a word. If it was only White Lotus one person, the cute, sweet girl who regarded him as her prince, would he fall in love with her? It wasn't difficult to figure out the answer, however, Yunshi couldn't say it out loud. Because that was impossible. Red Lotus and White Lotus were the twins of fate that could never be separated. The invisible thread wrapped around their hands had forever connected their destiny together. Eating, drinking, sleeping, fighting, even falling in love, getting married, they couldn't leave each other. Curse. Is that what White Lotus tried to tell me? Yunshi seemed to understand why White Lotus would look at him with longing. Perhaps what she had been waiting for was just a person who could accept her and Red Lotus and treat them like princesses. Prince. But I'm not the prince you imagined, Yunshi sighed. They were real princesses. However, he wasn't a prince, he was the star child who may run away at any time. Once his true identity is revealed, his 4 terrifying ex-girlfriends would not let him keep enjoying his peaceful life. Moreover, he still remembered that the twin witches were also candidate apostles of one of his ex-girlfriends. It was equal to looking for his own death if he dared to fall in love with them. This was probably the saddest thing in the world. The encounter between him and them was doomed to be a tragedy. It was clear that the relationship between them was prey and hunters. How did it get this far along? Great stars, tell me, why did you let them become the sleeping beauty in the dark forest? Why do I have a feeling that my skin is really smooth today? Red Lotus stretched herself out and looked at her sister with a pleasant look. Of course, my sister has the best skin. White Lotus squinted and smiled. Very well, I'm in a perfect condition. Let's start the second stage of the sacrificial ceremony. Affirming that she was in an unprecedented good condition, Red Lotus immediately turned her attention to the sacrificial ceremony. The sacrificial ceremony could be divided into 3 stages. The start, sacrifice. The core, invite gods. The end, send the god away. The first stage was the easiest and safest, as long as the sacrifices were appropriate. There was almost no record of failure in the first stage. The second stage was the most important. It determined what kind of gods would respond to the ceremony. It could be said that the success of the sacrificial ceremony depended on the second stage. No one would dare to say with certainty that the being that responded to the ceremony was a friendly god or an uncontrollable monster, because the gods and fantastic creatures who would notice the ceremony were random. The success or failure of the second stage also determined the outcome of the third stage. It was easy to summon a god, but would be extremely difficult to send the god away. If they summoned a distorted monster, to accomplish the third stage would become an impossible task. Most of the deaths in the sacrificial ceremonies occurred in the second stage and the third stages. Boom! Boom! Under the waterfall, the twin sisters prayed together in the morning, adjusting their bodies and minds for the most perfect state. Suddenly, Red Lotus realized something was wrong. No, it wasn't something bad, but something so good that made her feel incredible. Her synchronization rate with the Red Lotus Holy Sword was increasing strikingly. 50%, 51%, 52%, 53%. Usually, it would take her a month to increase 1% or 2% synchronization rate with the Red Lotus Holy Sword, but now, under the waterfall, she could clearly feel that the connection between the Red Lotus Holy Sword and herself was becoming closer and closer. As if something lurking in her body had been released, her body naturally emitted the same aura as the Red Lotus Holy Sword. There were even golden sparks flying out from the Red Lotus Holy Sword, floating around her body. It's strange, what's going on today? Red Lotus gazed at the Red Lotus Holy Sword in confusion. Every inch of her skin emitted scorching temperatures, but none of the heat had spilled out. From her soul to her body, she was immersed in a sense of extreme excitement, like a flaming fire, releasing her unbridled joy. White Lotus, I seem to have had an epiphany. Red Lotus smiled, opening her eyes wide in surprise. She didn't expect that the so-called epiphany in Buddhism would happen to herself. Sister, your body is enlightened. White Lotus naturally knew what had happened to her sister and began to regret it. If she had known it earlier, she would have changed her position on the bed last night. It must be because of my prince. If he took off my clothes last night instead of my sister's, would be the one whose body was enlightened today. Yes, that's the so-called epiphany, enlightenment. Naturally, Red Lotus knew nothing about what had happened to her last night. She only felt that her heart was beating violently, her chest and her whole body were burning as if they had turned into flames. This feeling is too wonderful. I want to be stronger. Red Lotus looked up and announced, for White Lotus, I want to be as strong as Cassina the battle god. Sister, what if I say that you can become stronger if you fell in love with the prince? White Lotus squinted, asking in a casual tone. The prince? That jerk. Remembering the prince who kissed her sister in the dream and ran away after that, Red Lotus bristled with anger in an instant. This joke is not funny at all. If it's true, I'd cut him into pieces right away, pieces that can be used to feed fish. Red Lotus raised her sword and said the sentence again. The prince must die. A pair of dark red flame wings extended from behind Red Lotus, the sparks on Red Lotus' sword flew up, and eventually gathered together and turned into a huge column of light, evaporating the huge waterfall instantly. For 10 seconds, not even a drop of water fell down from the waterfall. Red Lotus' sword cut off the water flow of the whole waterfall and created a deep red torrent of flame above the waterfall, which looked as if a volcano just erupted. Ah, there is still a long way to go. Looking at her sister's angry appearance and the flaming wings behind her, White Lotus felt that she still had to keep the thing last night a secret. My prince is probably no match of my sister now, and even I can't stop my sister if she went crazy. Nevertheless, it doesn't matter. My sister's body is still very honest. As I guessed, her body will never refuse my prince. For us, my prince is special, because he represents the glory of hope. Because my sister was close to the light of hope last night, she could become stronger today. Sooner or later, my sister will understand. So, wait a little longer, my prince. My sister and I will come to you and become your wings. Yawn. Yunshi suddenly shivered and sneezed on the roof of the witch palace. It's cold. Although it was a perfectly sunny day, Yunshi still felt as if he was a lost person wandering in the fog, unable to find the way forward. Master, you don't need to be afraid. After all, you have had so many girlfriends, it doesn't matter if you have more. Just like stepping on boats, if you stepped on 2 boats, you may fall into the water. However, if there are countless boats that have been strung together by countless steel wires, you can walk on the boats as though walking upon the flat ground. Mayor encouraged her master. After all, it was a great mission entrusted to her by the stars. Who said it? Yunshi always thought Mayor's words were unreliable. Balance in all things, said Mayor with a mysterious smile. Nothing is true, everything is permitted. This was your favorite quotation in your past life, Master. Actually, I shouldn't have come here. Looking at the altar of deity, Yunshi sighed. To be honest, he had an ominous presentiment and really wanted to leave as soon as possible. Unfortunately, once the sacrificial ceremony started, it could never be stopped, otherwise, the witches would be cursed. That was the reason why he didn't run away from the witch palace after he had actually gained his freedom again. White Lotus' gentle eyes were firmer than any shackles, locking Yunshi's heart tightly. She believed that her prince would never leave before they successfully accomplished the sacrificial ceremony. She was right. Yunshi wouldn't look at Red Lotus and White Lotus being cursed because of him, so he had to stay and wait for the coming of the evening. At dusk, it was the critical point between day and night, the time that devils and evils appeared, and the time that humans and gods could meet. In ancient times, witches called this time Devil's Time. The sacrifice in the first stage was to open a virtual door of dusk, so that the gods could pass through and descend into the real world from the void. On the silent altar of deity, Yunshi held red lotus hand in his left hand and white lotus hand in his right hand, and because the twin witches were born inseparable, they also held each other's hands. They sat in a circle in the middle of the altar of deity, waiting for the arrival of dusk. As time went by, White Lotus became slightly surprised and uneasy, because she didn't see any sign that the first stage of the ceremony had been accomplished. None of the gods or fantastic creatures in the void appeared in front of the other side of the door of dusk, which was about to open. Is there something wrong? According to her experience, she should be able to vaguely feel the aura of the god on the other side of the door of dusk now. However, there was nothing standing on the other side of the door. Red Lotus also felt confused, but her confusion wasn't related to the sacrificial ceremony. She just felt that her sister, White Lotus palm, was becoming hotter than usual. No, not only her sister, it seemed that her own palm was also becoming hotter and hotter. It seemed that the circle formed by the three people formed a strange aura field, which combined the three people's auras together. There was something that was happening in the circle. The three people's breathing and heartbeats were synchronizing. Aura resonance. Is it because of my prince? White Lotus guessed. Unlike her sister, she knew what it meant. On the contrary, Yunshi still knew nothing about what was happening. In fact, from the very beginning, he had had an uneasy feeling and always felt that something was wrong in the sacrificial ceremony. In fact, he guessed right. A great war was taking place in the void above the White Lotus Sword domain. I am an ancient god, a sunwalker, Hura Azda. My soldiers, obey my orders and fight for me. The sunwalker with a dog-headed mask on his face raised the scepter in his hand. In the blink of an eye, millions of sand soldiers came out of the void and marched toward the battlefield in an orderly line. Their opponent was an immortal bird flying in the sky, whose existence itself was already a disaster to the world. Just a few sparks on her beautiful tail feathers fell to the ground, and this had ignited and burned hundreds of sand soldiers into ashes. Phoenix, the immortal bird, the fantastic creature who represented for immortality. Hura Azda, the sunwalker, the king of the desert, and the god of billions of mortals. They were the first couple who noticed the sacrifice offered by the twin witches, and the first couple who fought for it. I saw it first, I saw it first. Phoenix swooped and spat out a deep red fireball from her mouth, bombarding Hura Azda's sand soldier army. Boom! Over 100,000 sand soldiers were totally evaporated under Phoenix's attack. As a mushroom cloud rose to the sky, a large part of the sand soldier army was eliminated in an instant. Phoenix, the sacrifice is mine. As a rare sunwalker, the king of desert, and an ancient god, Hura Azda seldom responded to any prayer or call from humans. The reason was simple, because humans couldn't offer him any sacrifices that could let him feel interested in. Even a top-level fire-type ruby couldn't get him to take a glance at it. As a sunwalker, he was a natural destroyer. No matter where he went, endless flame storms would naturally emerge and swallow the world. And during the process, countless gemstones would naturally form and condense. To put it bluntly, all sunwalkers were a king with endless wealth. They could make the top-level magic gemstones themselves. Moreover, they were also the strongest beings in the endless gods' domains. Common gemstones were meaningless to them, only the stones that contained a god's power, for example, a cryolite, could draw their attention. However, a cryolite could only slightly draw their attention, but none of them would respond to a call just for a cryolite. If the summoner didn't offer up hundreds of cryolites, it wasn't possible to summon a sunwalker. However, it was different this time. When the twin witches started the sacrificial ceremony, Hura Azda instantly noticed the sacrifice and realized how valuable it was. At a great cost, he passed through countless worlds and finally arrived at this place on time. It was hard to describe the strong temptation of the sacrifice was for him. After becoming a Sunwalker, he had almost forgotten the feeling of palpitating with excitement. How long has it been since the last time I had this feeling? I want it. I want it. Even if I have to sacrifice millions of my subordinates, I must obtain it. At the moment he arrived here, he instantly noticed Phoenix, who just reached this same place a moment ago. Without hesitation, he immediately closed the space passage and enclosed this area in the void using his god power, forcing Phoenix to fight with him before she could access the Door of Dusk. Hereby, the war between a god and a fantastic creature began. This was a war of gods. Whether it was Phoenix or Hura, the time of their lives was far longer than the history of the endless gods' domains. Even the aftermath of their battle was enough to destroy all of the White Lotus Sword domain. Above the battlefield, an ice-blue figure was staring coldly at the duel between the god and the fantastic creature. She was the ruler, the witness, and the guardian of the Sky Sword God's domain. Her presence represented that the duel between them had been recognized by the Sky Sword God's domain, and was under surveillance of them. Millions of sand soldiers raised the strange weapons in their hands and sang the praises of their god, the guardian of their race, the great king of the desert, the god of the sun, Hura Azda. When the soldiers were still alive, the first sentence they heard when they opened their eyes was, "Hura bless me," and then they were baptized by the priests and became a believer of the sun god. From birth to death, they listened to the voices of the priests and fought steadfastly for their god. After death, they would come to the sun god and become his immortal sand soldiers. The more devout they were, the stronger sand soldier they could transfer into after their death. Those who do good get a reward for good, those who do evil get a reward for evil. After good people died, beautiful girls would descend and lead them to heaven. However, if they were evil people, female ghosts would drag them into hell and let them suffer in perdition forever. The soldiers Hura needed would be selected from the judge's bridge, and Hura would grant them undead bodies and let them become members of his sand soldier army. The more sand soldiers Hura summoned, the stronger he would become. Usually, his sand soldier army was strong enough to sweep away millions of enemy troops alone, therefore, Hura hadn't had any fight with any beings for a very, very long time. However, his opponent this time was Phoenix, a fantastic creature whose identity wasn't inferior to him. She held not only the rule of fire, but also the concept of eternity. All attacks were meaningless to Phoenix, because she was an immortal bird who wouldn't die. Phoenix was the only fantastic creatures known in the endless gods' domains that couldn't be killed by any methods. Her existence itself stood for eternity. Her regenerative capacity was much stronger than Hydra, who had 9 heads and 9 lives. Even though Hura was a Sunwalker, it felt tricky when facing such an opponent who couldn't be killed. During the war that had lasted for more than 10 hours, he had successfully hit Phoenix's heart, head, and body more than once. Phoenix's whole body had even been crushed by his golden scepter, however, she could always recover herself in a flash as if nothing had happened. Witness the sin of the sun. As the evening approached, Hura Azda finally decided to get rid of Phoenix. The sun disk, appear for me. The golden scepter was inserted into the desert under Hura's feet, and there, countless fireballs began appearing in the sky. A golden fireball appeared in the middle of the sky, and with countless black spots flying in the fireball. After it appeared on the battlefield, the temperature around it began to rise at a terrible rate. It was a god weapon, the sun disk. It wasn't a common god weapon that could be obtained by a common hero-ranked humans, but a weapon that really belonged to a god. All over the sky, unnatural fire clouds appeared in an unnatural way. One cloud after another gathered together and flew to him from 10 miles, 100 miles, or even thousands of miles away. The original bright sunshine became dim again, and the gray clouds fell heavily to the ground as if they were going to crush the earth. Rotating, rotating, it seemed as if there was an invisible mixer in the sky. All clouds in the sky started rotating at an incredible speed, which looked as if a huge flame furnace was being ignited. In fact, that was what was happening. The sun disk was a miniature incarnation of the sun, which was also named SN drive in some gods' domains. SN drive, sun nucleus drive, I'm not afraid. Because she knew that she wouldn't die, Phoenix always chose the same tactic in battle. Whoever her opponent was, she just needed to rush up and beat them down. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Rest in peace. Hura closed his eyes. There were gold-red fragments flying around his fingertips, which looked surprisingly similar to the cryolites sacrificed by the twin witches. All of a sudden, a brighter figure appeared in the middle of the sky. His body was brighter than the sun, emitted golden lights and illuminated the entire world. When this figure appeared, a strong aura spread and announced his dignity to all beings in the world. All the sand soldiers knelt down and presented their highest respect to the great existence in the sky. It was Hura Azda's real body, the Sunwalker, a real supreme sun god. When he opened his eyes, there were countless golden lights shining out of his eyes. His hair was as bright as the real sun. In a flash, it looked as if there were countless hot suns emerging out in the sky. He held a small, golden sun disk in his hand, aiming at Phoenix with no emotion in his eyes. Only the black particles that were constantly emanating from the sun disk in his hand announced what an ominous thing this god weapon was at the moment. It's an astronomical phenomenon called sunspot. A sunspot was powerful enough to destroy a planet completely. At this moment, the number of sunspots twining around the sun disk had already exceeded 3,000. Compressing a sunspot into a black particle, it was already a power that was beyond all hero-ranked beings' imagination. This was the ability of a legendary god, the power of the Sunwalker. Rest in peace, Phoenix. Hura shook his head at Phoenix, who was rushing at him, throwing the sun disk lightly towards her. The golden sun disk turned into a magnificent golden track, cut through Phoenix's body and lighted her feathers. Instantly, countless sunspots exploded and annihilated Phoenix's body, destroying the entire battlefield. Continuous explosions of sunspots almost decomposed and annihilated everything in the void. Endless solar storms swept through the entire space. The end of the world. The power of the sun disk could only be described in this way. That was the power of the Sunwalker. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.